Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to the CWMU Advisory, the meeting of the CWMU Advisory Committee. The CWMU Advisory Committee is a committee that's established in rule, and it has a few functions. One of the functions is to hear variances. So in a rule, it lays out exactly what a CWMU has to do as far as acreage and species, acres for species things. But there's also the option for a variance. In the variance process, the committee hears those variances, and then they submit the recommendations, which are heard by both the division director and directly to the wildlife board as well. Tonight we'll do that. Another thing that we do is we review complaints in the CWMU program and take action on those complaints. The board has the authority to put a CWMU on probation, and then we'll make recommendations about either removing that probation or maintaining that probation after a year. And they also make recommendations to the wildlife board and director about whether a CWMU should continue and how it should continue. The other thing in rule that's established that we need to do is review antlerless harvest. So we'll follow the agenda as outlined. The first thing we'll come to are the variances. After the variances, we'll hear the complaints. And then we'll count on harvest. For the variances, the process will proceed as follows. The person seeking a variance will have up to 8 minutes to explain the rationale, and no longer. Then the committee will be able to ask the individual questions, and that will also give some time to the division for questions at that point as well. So we'll proceed with that part of the agenda. Chad, do you want to take it from there? I didn't do introductions. Time out. I didn't do introductions. Should we back up and do introductions really quickly? Forget that's another meeting. So we'll start with introductions, and we'll start on my left, far left, with Mr. Louder.
My name is Mike Lauder. I represent Sportsman.
Tim Frice, represent CWMUs.
Greg Wilding, at large.
I'm Covy Jones, and I'm the chair of this committee, but also a non-voting member.
Randy Elliott, the public elected official from Davis County.
Clint McLean, sportsman.
Chris Robinson, I don't know whom I represent. Okay. I just want to point out that Randy doesn't have his bun today, so something must be different.
Okay, with that, we'll turn the time back over to you, Chad.
I'll just give a brief introduction to this, letting the Mike probably give more than me. But this is a variance that we heard. We actually heard this last year. It was under 5,000 acres, and they're looking to be a CWMU. They've got their 5,000 acres, and I can't remember the exact number, but it's between 5 and 6,000 acres. And now they're looking for a variance to be an elk CWMU. This is in Beaver County on Beaver Mountain, I believe. And I guess if we want more specifics, let's ask the biologist. Mike Wardle's here tonight.
So for clarification, you said last year they came for a variance and they didn't have the acreage, but this year you told them they had to come back for 5,000 acres. Is that correct?
Yeah. So last year they were under 5,000. We said try to get your 5,000, and they did that to be a deer CWMU. But now they'd like the variance to be an elk CWMU, which is a 10,000 acre requirement.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I think if is this the Mike Labrum one?
Yes.
So Mike contacted me, and we have, is it a section, Mike?
Yes.
We have a section one of our companies does in this area that we've verbally said could be a part of it. And I don't know, I assume you're needing it to reach your total. So I'm conflicted there. I'll recuse myself from any discussion on this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. Okay, let's allow Mike a chance to explain his perspective there. And then the biologist, Mike Wardle's also here.
And the maps are on the very back, as far as the actual, there's 3 maps in the very back.
So, Mr. Labrum, I'm going to say this too. I learned my lesson last time too. So we're gonna give you 8 minutes, but we're gonna hold you to 8 minutes. Okay.
I learned to talk back.
Okay. Thank you.
So, okay, let me get the microphone and then. Tendency to stand over here, so tell me when to start.
Mike, do you have a timer or do I need to set one? I'm fine to set one. Okay. And I'll let you know when you have a minute left.
Okay, I appreciate it. So we're starting? Okay. 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 All right. So you guys are all well aware of the CWMU rules. I just kind of put this up here because I've seen the variance requests before, and I know that what you guys have said is the most important thing to you, and when the reactions I've seen for under acreage elk CWMUs is the property capable of harboring a huntable population of elk during the season? Can the property accommodate the anticipated number of hunters and provide a reasonable hunting opportunity? Then obviously the 10,000 acres, because we don't meet it. But these two have been what you have deemed to be the most important in all the meetings I've watched about variances. So obviously, because there is a variance to the 10,000 acres, lawmakers thought it isn't a hard, fast rule. We will let specific properties ask for a variance. If a property can show that it can meet these things, then we'll allow a variance. So they are allowed. Now, CWMUs are evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So there's no rule that says if you give us a variance, that that you have to give it to everyone else. The proposed CWMU must be evaluated on its unique characteristics. And so we think our specific ranch can harbor elk and meet those two top priorities. So let's move. I'll keep moving. Okay. So the benefits of having this CWMU. So we also have the Old Woman Plateau CWMU, and it's under acreage. So we have 30 years of running an under acreage elk CWMU under our belt. We were the very first year you could have CWMUs. We were part of it. We're under acreage, and we've been successful since the beginning. We've managed to hunt elk and have one of the highest success rates for elk in elk CWMUs. And how we've done it, we've improved habitat, water resources. Well, this is actually what we have up there. These are reasons we'll be successful. We partner with the state agencies, whether it's the DWR, the Department of Resources. We have we'll be improving habitat, water sources. We have tons of water up there. It will open up a large private ranch that's never been huntable by the public. This ranch has never been open to the public. We should be promoting more opportunities for public hunting, not taking them away. So here's a little bit of our history really quickly. So we've improved the water and feed on our existing CWMU from the beginning. We've spent over $300,000 improving feed, water lines, water systems in collaboration with Department of Resources and DWR. We've put in 8 miles of water line, brush removal, fire, reseeding. The elk on the ranch we have now are under acreage CWMU. The numbers have increased and increased and increased every year because the elk want to be in there. They don't want to leave because of all of the work that we've put in. And we're hunters and we're passionate about this. And so we're able to bring our knowledge of how to properly operate an under acreage CWMU to what I'm asking for the variance this year, because we know how to do it. We've done it for 30 years. We've hunted a ranch that has 6,400 acres for 30 years. We've done it in under acreage. And so we actually kill bigger bulls on our unit on average than the manti around us. And so we've been very successful with an underacreage CWMU for a long time. We know how to do it. And you know, we're pro wildlife, and we want to work with the Department of Fish and Game. We want to work with the resources to make it a better unit. So these are some of the things we've done already. The positives for the beaver. Okay, we've already spoken with the Department of Natural Resources about cost sharing some of the improvements for the water systems and the feed on this beaver ranch, and they're anxious to be on board with this. There's very few landowners on the Beaver Mountain that work with the DWR, and Mike can speak more to that. He's been doing it for longer than I have on the Beaver. We're the largest private ranch, on single private holding of property on the Beaver unit. And there's no larger ranches other than ours. There's no larger ranches than ours that are willing to work with the DWR to manage game, improve feed. I mean, and I put this in here, I mean, it's the alternative to having a hunting unit and being able to do something like this and improve it for wildlife is that you have a great big piece of ground that's not managed for wildlife and it's not hunted, and the game end up piling in there from the public pressure, and then they're not managed. And so we're all about this. We've done this on the Old Woman Plateau, CWMU, and we love it. We're elk hunters. We love to work with the DWR. And that's just who we are. And I talked about giving more public opportunity to tags to this land. I mean, what's the negative to opening up a large hunting ranch to the public? I mean, I challenge you to come up with a negative for that. I mean, that's what we're here for. That's the point of the CWMU process. And adding more hunter opportunity. This opens up a gigantic piece of private land that's never been hunted before. So now I put, from what I've seen in the past, and last year I watched someone ask for an elk variance for about this same number of acreage, and the main issue was, will the elk stay on the ranch when you hunt them? Because if it's small and they leave, and then people aren't happy, and that has been the number one issue on. And I think Covy last year stood up here and talked about why the 10,000 acres is there. He actually gave kind of a summary of where it came from. And we actually were part of the PHU program back in the day. We had a different mountain that we were part of the PHU program, but there were a lot of small ranches and they weren't as regulated as the CWMU process is now. We're much more regulated. They put the 10,000 acre rule in place because they understood there might be exceptions to put in a variance. So when they went from PHU to CWMU, even though they bumped it to 10,000 acres, they put the variance in place because they knew there would be ranches that show up. Okay. And actually, Covy said last year, there are underacreage CWMUs that are functioning very well in the program right now. And so if they exist now, that means they can exist. There could be more in the future. And okay, another reason that we know the elk will stay on this ranch, I don't know if you've ever hunted, you guys are all hunters. This is the Beaver Mountain. I mean, big, deep, nasty canyons. Elk, when you shoot at an elk here, they don't, on the Beaver Mountain, they don't run into here and up over here and over here. This is nasty stuff. They circle big peaks and they come back here, and this isn't a normal terrain where elk will run for 3 miles to get away from hunting pressure. I mean, it's steep, rugged, and they seek timber and they seek canyons that are next to where they are now. That's just a picture of the ranch. I won't go through that. Obviously, longer CWMU seasons. Let me just finish with this. This is on the sheet. This shows that our ranch have these things here that will keep the elk in there. We know the elk will stay there. We've owned it for a couple years now. Now, and I'll finish with this. The CWMU program is much more regulated, and it has a 3-year review process. So I'm not asking you for a lifetime contract to have this PHU. this is something that the board can feel good that if this is granted, we get reviewed every 3 years. If we're not having success, you'll know it. I mean, this is something we know we can do this, but it's not something where if you make a decision today to give us the opportunity to show you, you're not making a lifetime agreement. This is something that is set up so that we can be reviewed every 3 years. Anyway, and I guess this is the last thing, and Michael talked to this, if the biologist. Mike has been looking at the ranch and watching the ranch and studying the ranch as well. He actually came to us and said he believes that there could possibly be 9 to 10 bulls killed on this ranch a year successfully. But we're actually only asking for 6. We're asking for 6 bulls to be killed a year because we don't want to kill. We want the success to be higher. We want the size of bulls higher, and we want the public to be satisfied. So we're not trying to overshoot this ranch. We want to kill a few bulls off of it. We want the elk to stay there. And so I just think we're passionate about it. And I think we would do a good job. I think, we're asking for you to give us a shot. I know this ranch can harbor elk through the season. So
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, we'll bring it back to the committee. And Mike, do you have anything that you would like to add on this from your perspective as a biologist? And then we'll come back and do questions.
Yes, I'm Mike Wardle. I'm the district biologist that covers the Beaver. The only thing I would add, and I've talked with this about Mike, my only concern with this property is just the cow hunting. With it being a smaller property in size, when we issue cow permits, that's my only hesitation, is that they will have to be creative on when they cow hunt, because the property is a higher elevation property. It's like 8,000 to about 10,000 feet. So when they do their cow hunting, it's probably going to have to be anytime from August to October. They're not going to have that luxury of hunting cows in November or December. So they're going to have to be creative on how they do that and not push the elk off the CWMU. But Mike and I have had that conversation, and I just wanted to make sure that was brought up.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the committee for questions.
I have a question for Mike Wardle. How many tags, this is in a limited entry bull elk unit, how many tags would they be able to get if we approve this? Variance,
when the conversations Mike and I have had, we've talked about like 5 or 6 tags. The Beaver has got a lot of bulls on it right now. That might not be sustainable into the future, but right now, definitely, I think they'd be fine killing that many bulls.
Mike, how many elk do you think, just a ballpark, how many elk you think maybe for either of you? How many elk live on this ranch?
So on winter flights, we typically don't see elk on the property during the winter, but during the summer, it does have a lot of elk. And when I do my preseason classification in July and August, I can typically count on seeing anywhere from 50 to 100 cows on or near that property. And there are bulls. Like, the bulls to me aren't the issue. It's probably more the cows on if they're going to stay there or not.
And I can quick answer that. So obviously we've only owned it for 2 years, but we've spent a lot of time up there because we knew we wanted to hunt it. And there will be anywhere from 20 to 40 bulls on this property from August through October during the hunting season. And then obviously the cows get split up when they start rutting. But there's a large huntable population of bulls too.
Let's see, a couple questions for you guys. Mike Labrum first.
Yeah.
So in your packet, it said you hunt bulls up there now. How do you do that? Are people buying conservation tags and coming up there, or how are you hunting them now?
Well, it might have been confusing. When I talked about hunting, I don't remember putting that we hunt bulls up there now. I was talking more about hunting the bulls that our experience hunting bulls on our CWMU that we have now, because it's under acreage. And so we've learned how to be successful on an under acreage CWMU. But we don't hunt them up there now. The only time we've seen people hunting bulls up there now is when we've been up there and seen people trespassing, pushing the boundary and trying to get into the elk, but we have not hunted them.
And so, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And how How will you manage the boundary on this thing? Is there a fence on it already?
There-
How are you going to control
Well,
that?
there's limited fences. So, and that was one of the issues that we brought up last year when you had us here we were talking about the deer. And basically kind of with the whole push of private ground that we've had because of Onyx, we just figured that the way of the world is going towards Onyx maps and the hunters knowing where the boundaries are. That's kind of what's been brought up. So, but some of there are distinguishable boundaries is what I'm trying to say. There's ridge lines that are the boundaries and things that we can post, but there's not a lot of range fencing right now. So it would be more of the kind of the push towards Onyx maps that this is where this is going and people knowing where the boundaries are. Now, Chris's company runs cows up there. I think they have, and so putting fences up would be in collaboration with Chris because they run cows on this property. So.
Okay, thank you.
One more question for me, or maybe two. Are there any other private parcels that could be added? Or is this
There's
it?
not. If you look at that map on the back, we actually, since I came here last year, we actually went and bought out 3 different landowners and then partnered with Chris's company and one other landowner. So we've scooped every piece of private that's there. There's not another ounce that we could get. So we're kind of at our max at this point. There's no getting bigger.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Mike.
Hey.
You look better off the video.
Yeah, you probably didn't want to see me come through the door. Just kidding. Is there a landowner association on the Beaver unit?
There's
And
not.
What is holding that back? What's your
I'll let
perspective on-
Mike talk to
Yeah.
that because we've attempted to look into that and it's.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Mike. We've tried a few times to put a landowner association together. Honestly, the struggle has been getting a landowner that was willing to take on the initiative to do that. Mike was willing to do that, and they spent a lot of time looking at it. We've looked at it quite a bit. The struggle with the Beaver is there's not a lot of large landowners. Most of it's small private parcels, and it's never been successful just because when you put that many hands in the pot, it just never ends up working and being worth people's time.
Okay, and then how do you perceive if that CWMU gets 6 bull elk tags, how do you perceive that affecting the public tags? I know we're trying to kill bulls on the Beaver currently, but that's going to change at some point.
Right. I don't see it really impacting the public tags. It's such a small number still. So our public tags are mostly managed off that average age, right? And it's such a small percentage, I don't think it's going to really skew the data one way or the other.
Okay. So on your other units that you manage, if there's a 5,000 acre ranch, how would those landowners obtain those tags? Because I do think it would affect it, because what are you going to give, 70-ish tags?
Yeah, we were at 65 last year.
Yeah, so you're 10% of your tags you're willing to give to one CWMU. Does that make sense? So
Right.
That's a considerable amount, I think, to the public, 10% of the tags.
Right, and to be clear, like I'm not standing here fighting for the CWMU, right? Our recommendation is against it because it doesn't fit the rule. But it would have an impact, I guess, at that level. But really, I don't know whether it's going to be huge, just because I don't think it's going to skew that average age a whole lot.
Thank you.
What type of variances have we given in the past for acreage? Is there that many of them out there?
There are a few. Chad's probably best to answer this. Where did he go? Oh, there he is. There are a few variances out there. There are also some that, I gave some of this history last time, but I guess I can give it again quickly, and that is that it wasn't always 10,000 acres for elk. You know, we started out with the posted hunting unit, and when we switched to the CWMU program and moved that to 10,000 acres, there were some that were under, that were functioning well, that have stayed. But what we learned, and I get it, the variance process here, because not everything fits. But what we learned at lower acreages is that for elk, they often didn't work. So it was tried. There are a few out there that do work. Not everything's the same. But overall, it didn't work. And so that's why that was bumped up to 10,000 acres. As far as number of CWMUs that have an under acreage variance, Chad, there's over 130 CWMUs. You know how many have the under acreage variance? Don't get this wrong.
Yeah, I would say less than 10, but that's going off the top of my head. I'd have to verify it. Oh, I don't. Okay, I have not counted them, so if that's what I presented last year, I'm sure I was right last year.
Chad, would that number include the quote-unquote grandfathered CWMUs from the PHU units?
I think that would be every CWMU.
That's what I think too. So the actual number of variances is extremely low because I think most of those fall under the PHU unit, like the Old Woman Plateau.
Yeah, we weren't actually PHU, we were applied for years.
We're going to get in trouble because this is a public meeting.
Anyway,
so.
sorry. Yeah, we weren't a PHU. We applied the first year CWMU and got the variance to be under acreage for elk. So.
But Mike, I think to your point, I don't know that we've granted very many since the very beginning of the CWMUs. I think that's what you're trying to get at, right?
I got a question in regards to the cow tags. It sounded like that was kind of a little bit of a concern. You guys talked about it. How did you work that out? To where you're on a limited, you're limited on time and you're trying to.
Well, his concern was just, will we let people hunt cows during the same time we're hunting bulls? And we just have to. I mean, that's the thing is because the cows are in there from August through October. And so we can't have a late cow hunt that's December, January. And so the cows will be hunted we'll have to manage those to be hunted during August, kind of August, September, October, with in between our bull hunters. So.
Any more questions or bring it back to committee discussion?
One last question, probably for Mike Wardle. So then if you did do cow tags on here, where are we at on the Beaver right now? Are we trying to kill cows or how many would you want to kill on this property if you did?
Not currently, we're under objective currently, but within a few years, we're probably going to be killing cows again. The Beavers has a low population objective, so it's always going to be, if this was a CWMU that exists clear in the future, it's always going to be part of that.
And so, we typically give more cow tags to the public hunters and gives them opportunity, but there likely might not even be cow tags if we did approve this thing.
No, I think that I would still recommend cow tags. I think at a bare minimum, we would have as many cow tags as we have bulls. Even if we're still below objective, we can grow elk in other places too. So,
thanks, Mike.
Looks like that's the end of questions, so bring it back. What are your thoughts?
So the variance that we recommended last year, that was because it was an elk herd that was hitting alfalfa fields really hard. And the division was spending a lot of money and time and effort working with that landowner for depredation issues. This is a little different where it's mountain range land, in my opinion. Did that variance what's the update on that? Did the Wildlife Board pass that variance?
Chad?
Yeah, they did pass it.
Okay, that's what I remembered. But it was based on a little bit different reasoning, I think, so. The other question I had, and I think it might be for the division, is how are the public lands included within the boundary of this CWMU? How would they be used? They be excluded, included,
There's
forcefully
probably
included?
two questions there. One is, how is the acreage calculated? And two is, yeah, what's the intent?
Yeah.
Mike, how was the acreage calculated? And what was the intent with the public land that's inside the CWMU?
So there's like 120 or 30 acres of forest ground inside the 5,300, and it's not included in that 5,300. So that 5,300 is only deeded acres. One of the pieces of forest is there's not even a road into it, so there's no access. They're totally surrounded, all of the forest ground that's in there. And there's only one road that goes through the corner of one like 60-acre piece of forest. So we actually, I mean, we'd be willing to even do, trade a piece of the private that's on the edge. There's one piece of private that's on the edge of the CWMU, and we'd even be willing to do a trade land for, it's almost equal amount of acreage between the two from what the forest that's inside and that piece that's on the edge of the CWMU. So the request would be to include it in. It's not accessible by the public anyway. And so it would be something we could even look at trading some stuff.
I have a couple thoughts. My first thought is, and I've never been on this, but driving past it on I-15, it's probably a really big 5,300 acres. Is that safe to say? Just because of the steepness of the terrain? So I think we got to kind of look at it that not every acre is created equal. And also the fact that there is no other private, that I think I could get behind supporting this. I mean, that's like, it would be a trial basis, right? I mean, if you don't kill your cows, you're going to get complaints. And it's my thoughts. I don't know, I'm just spitballing a little bit.
I guess I'll throw my thoughts out there. I know that you could probably run it as such. I've been involved with about a 2,000 acre piece of land in the past that you could have killed a lot of bulls and kept within the age objective of the surrounding limited entry unit. I just don't know that this is the intent of the variance process. Of the reason to have the variance, I worry that we'd be opening a big wide door. The last variance that we approved that was range land, that CWMU was just a few hundred acres short and couldn't get any other lands around it and put it on a trial basis. And so I would probably vote against it just because of the lack of acreage.
I'm struggling with this one a little bit myself with the variance, but like you mentioned, you have a 3-year trial period, I guess, per se, kind of like Tim was saying. And if it's managed and we're able to stay within that age objective and give more opportunity to public hunters to be able to access land that's not going to be hunted, and again, it's reviewed every 3 years. I'm kind of torn because, yeah, that is quite a chunk of land land mass that is short, but that's just my 2 cents.
This property, like it was mentioned earlier, it looks like it's kind of in a bowl. I'm sure if we were to go out there and hike it, we'd probably say it looks a lot more than 5,300 acres as we try to scale a mountain. So I hate that it's under acreage, but each property has to be looked at uniquely. And so I kind of feel like this one's kind of a unique property in the sense that it is kind of an unaccessible piece of property unless you go on these private properties. And then being that the mountain terrain, when I had the couple ranches, they had mountain terrains. The acre seems a lot more when you're out there with them and stuff like that. So I probably leaned just to kind of a trial basis on at least my vote. And so we'll let everybody else speak to it, but kind of leaning towards letting it at least be a trial.
So I kind of am in Mike Christensen's camp today, just because I always look at these variances thinking, all right, how many more are we going to have come in? And there are a lot of properties that are in that 5,000 acre mark that would probably like to have elk units, and the Fish and Game has put this rule together for a reason. And so we use it as a pretty good guideline with very few variances. There are a lot of things a lot of conditions that make sense here that Mike Labrum's dealing with that make sense for it to be a CWMU, but I've got to say that I'm probably leaning towards more of a nervousness of all of the different variances we're going to be seeing if we did approve one that was so much smaller than a typical 10,000.
Yeah, and I just go back. I know it's surrounded by forest, and I think sometimes even myself, I get hung up a little bit like, well, what other ground could they go acquire? I think that's a little bit of a folly of an argument, because it lends us to think that the neighboring public or private landowner would allow somebody to lease their land, and I think that we've actually, as an advisory committee, are more prone to giving away the public land than a private landowner would give it away. You know, why don't we just draw those boundaries out on the ridges and include some Forest Service land and give them their 10,000? You know, that's. I think that would be folly too. I think that would be a mistake too. And it's nothing against the land or the landowner. I think that, I mean, I'm just thinking of how many deer CWMUs are 5,200 acres that next time they're going to show up and say, hey, you know, we have elk on us too. There's a reason why that's 10,000, and to cut it in half, I'm having if it was 9, if it was up there closer, but we're almost half. So that's the last thing I'll say on it.
No, I do agree with you on that. I mean, like you said, you could be opening Pandora's box, and next year could be next meeting could be a whole different ballpark. And so, yeah, that is a good point. There are rules for a reason.
Can I just speak back to my point too? I think this is probably some of the biggest acreage in the state, honestly. And I bet we could go to a lot of 10 and 15,000 acre CWMUs that would seem smaller than this, that are offered that. And I think too, not having a chance to, I mean, you could put together a landowner association, but it sounds like that's never going to happen. That, you know, that should be considered here too. I think that, you know, the landowner has no other options except draw a beaver tag once every 25 years to go, you know, use the resource.
Any further discussion? All right, we're looking for a motion.
I think that approving this CWMU would effectively end the 10,000 acre limit in the rule. And I would rather the folks in the brown coats in the back and the biologists that are smarter than me to come to tell me that we ought to go that direction before we do it through the variance process here. And my motion is to not approve what's the name of the Beaver Mountain Elk CWMU variance to include elk.
I'll second that.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'll second that.
Okay. Who's recording this tonight, Chad? Shayla? All right, so did you get that with the names? Sweet. Good job. Thanks, Shayla. Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
No.
Aye.
No?
Aye.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so that, I got to count really quick. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor?
Yep.
And 3 opposed? 2 opposed. Motion passes and 1 abstention. Motion passes. We always, on the record, we always allow those that oppose the motion to state why so that they can have that sentiment out there.
I just think they are limited with other options, and this would be a good opportunity to use the resource on private ground.
Just case-by-case basis, being that this one's kind of a landlocked position, piece of property, and the hillsides and everything else taken into account. That's the reason why I voted against it, because I think you just got to be able to, it would be nice if we can go see these parcels ourselves and kind of be on the ground and see it versus kind of arm's length from a piece of paper. So I think we might have a different opinion if we did. So thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I have one quick question, Chair.
Yes.
Is this CWMU going to be going to go ahead as a deer CWMU?
I assume they're applying this year for a deer CWMU for Mr. Labrum? Yes.
And the reason why I ask is the public lands, do we do that after they apply, or do we do that before, or is that or do that after they go through their first core, or how does that work? So I'm just kind of putting him on the spot, Mike, sorry.
The way we've always done it is kind of evaluate it. It would be after their first time is their first COR. But they would have to, with this committee, right? But we evaluate it through the public process as they apply. Is that fair, Chad?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is
Yeah.
we'll discuss that through the RAC and the board process. Say this one didn't go through the committee. It's a new CWMU. So yeah, there'll be a chance for input on that this fall.
And Mr. Labrum, you do intend to apply for a deer CWMU, is that correct?
I mean, that's the intent.
Okay.
And so we can get with Mike and get the application together.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to number 5, variance request of Avintaquin Canyon. Chad, could you introduce the topic?
Can we do 4 first?
No. Yes.
Okay. That's good because actually number 5, he went to the Salt Lake office and thought it started at 6. So he's hustling to get here. So it'll be better that we do number 4 first. So this is North Peaks. So this is a non-contiguous variance. So just to give you a little background or whatever on rule, it really doesn't tackle the topic of non-contiguous other than the fact that your non-contiguous can't be part of your initial application to meet your minimum acreage. Other than that, it doesn't really address this in rule. So I think some of the considerations that probably should be made is the size of that non-contiguous piece and probably the proximity it is to the CWMU. But I don't know that we have a whole lot more guidance than that. And yeah.
So Chad, can you help us understand that a little better then? So it's already a CWMU. They're asking to add a piece of non-contiguous ground that's.
Yeah, this one's actually 2 pieces of non-contiguous. So there's 2 pieces that are not connected to an existing CWMU that they're looking to add a thing. And Gary will say when he gets up, but I think it's about 2,000 total acres, 50, I can't remember. 1,500 total acres between the 2 pieces.
Okay. With that, Mr. Webb, do you have anything to add to that? Sure. You have 8 minutes. You get the same as everybody else.
Chad's going to pull up the map real quick. I'm Gary Webb. I'm the operator of the North Peak Cooperative Unit here representing the landowner. So the North Peak CWMU, hopefully everybody's read the email. It's right now it's a little more than 28,000 acres. Adding this will bring it to just under 30,000 approximately. Both of these parcels, the North Peak CWMU is a single entity owner. And these two parcels that are within a mile and a half, the way the crow flies, are owned by that same entity. And we want to bring their private property into the CWMU, be able to manage it like we're managing the other parcel of ground. So the benefit for the landowner is we can manage all the corners of the private land. The benefit for the public is whoever draws that tag is going to have the benefit of hunting this ground. Both of these parcels have water on them. Both of them have had improvements done over the past decades. One of them has a nice reservoir on it. The other part has some fields that at one time were harvested for grass. So they're very well developed and underutilized as far as from a hunting standpoint. So we'd like to bring them in. If you look at the map, you can see in the fainted yellow on the right side of your map is our boundary existing, and you can see the proximity of the two parcels. One of them's about 900, a little more than 900 acres. The other one's a little more than 500. So happy to take some questions.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Yes. Who owns the land in between the two purples and the mustard on the right?
So I think it's state land or BLM land.
It's BLM?
I think there's some private that's a little bit south of the southern piece, but it's not the way the crow flies from the boundaries of this existing CWMU.
And is that land used by the public for hunting, the BLM lands?
Oh, yes. I guess that it is. It's general season for deer, limited entry for elk.
And this NP is North Peak CWMU is for both elk with 26,000 acres. I'm sure you've got elk and mule deer.
Yes.
And you're not asking, you wouldn't ask for more permits because of the inclusion of this. It doesn't, is there a substantial, number of deer that use that land or?
We're not counting deer all the time in there, but yeah, there's wildlife, moose, elk, deer, antelope are on this property, and the cattle for the landowner. And we're not asking for more permits, deer or elk.
This might be a question for Chad, but Mike, you might be able to answer it too. Isn't that the property that the person who texted us was confused, thinking it was trade lands, and they were saying that it was not any good for trade lands?
Yeah, this was,
yes.
The division had it incorrect on their website, so.
And now the operator wants to include it as hunting property because he thinks that there's animals on there. That's a little bit comical to me. But great, let's get hunting it. Does that sound about right, Chad? Did we have that right?
Yeah, I think you're spot on that.
Okay.
The two non-contiguous parcels, are they shown on that map in front of us now?
They are. I'll point to them here.
The lower one looks like it's contiguous.
And these are the two parcels.
Oh, over there. I got you. Okay. Thank you.
We'll get that on the mic.
Yeah. Sorry, this is the Nevada border here. This blue line is the boundary, the western boundary of the CWMU. These are the parcels.
How far away are they from that polygon that's in the CWMU now? Is that
I don't know exactly, but I would say the way the crow flies, we're within 1.5 miles.
That square that's the furthest left one, those squares are miles. Those are sections, right? That yellow one.
Yes, sir.
So that's a mile. So it's 1.5 miles maybe. Uh-huh.
Or like 3.5 inches on the screen.
I'd like a little clarification from the division. Like, this makes sense in my mind, but what's the purpose of, like, the division frowns on non-contiguous acreage? I mean, if their CWMU has enough acreage to be a CWMU, so that's not a question. It's got enough contiguous acres. But when we start including non-contiguous acres, how far away does the division perceive that that can be a productive use of the CWMU program to include non-contiguous? Because 1.5 miles seems reasonable. But is 10 miles reasonable? I mean, what is there a standard there?
There's not. And I think that'll be something that we tackle in the future is having some more direction there. But right now it just says, the only way the rule addresses it is saying if it can't be used to meet the minimum requirements. And so we don't have a lot to go off of. We don't have a ton of non-contiguous lands, but we do have some. Mike, that was just up here with Old Woman, that one has, I believe, that one, our map, I shouldn't bring that up because our maps were on that one too, but we have some statewide that we do have some. That's something we need to consider, I think, is distance and size. Honestly, I don't know that it makes sense to do a whole bunch of like 10-acre pieces that are really close. So,
Chad, can I add to that?
yeah,
I think there's a lot to consider. One is distance, one is size, one is what management, is the management the same? So are you crossing a management boundary where you're going from limited entry to general season? Or are you crossing a boundary where, just management boundary and management metrics? And the other one is ease of hunting. And so Chad's right, this isn't all spelled out in rule. I can also see where this could become very problematic if it became something where it was, well, I'm going to have a CWMU that meets the minimums, jump the neighbor that I don't like, get to the next property, jump the next neighbor, get to the next property, and it could end up being a system that was very complicated. So again, not making a recommendation, just saying that as we discuss these, those are some things to keep in mind as to, for each individual circumstance, what would that look like?
and I'd say take into consideration too land ownership.
Yeah, and I didn't mention that, but land ownership, and you can clearly see that it's private land, public land, private land in this instance.
But and too that it's the same land.
It's the same land ownership, yeah, sure.
So I think an appropriate question for Gary then would be, let's run through a couple of things here. So do you guide your public hunters?
Say that again?
Do you guide your public hunters?
No, we meet them there, but we don't guide them unless
Okay.
they request it.
And so considering that they, of course, will have access to these properties to be able to hunt, how will you communicate that to them, and how will you make sure they understand the boundaries and opportunities that exist there so that it's good for them as well as your private hunters?
Sure, good question. So we meet all the public hunters at the property. We do a tour with the property. We show them the boundary lines. And that's where they'll get all their information. They'll get their mapping from us. They'll get codes to all the gates. They'll have access to all of the property. And so.
Great. So we can get a commitment
And I will
from
add
you.
that sorry, Greg, again.
I said great. So we can get a commitment from you. You'll help the public hunters utilize these properties as well. And you've got some tricky boundaries here and there, and you help them get around those.
Absolutely. And we've got a great track record, fabulous landowner. You know, I think our bull elk harvest is at 100%. Deer, I think we're at almost right at 100, maybe 90%, between 4 and 5 stars as far as the satisfaction goes. So landowner does a great job. I think we do a great job. And our intent is to let the draw tag hunters and the landowner hunt this ground. It's ground that should be hunted. It's been maintained, taken care of, improved. It makes sense from our perspective. So.
Great. So one last comment, I guess one other thing for our committee to be considering in situations like this, looking back at our list for the last 12 years, North Peaks has never been in here for a complaint. So that's another positive thing, I guess. Thanks, Gary.
Any further questions or committee discussion?
Well, this one makes sense. I wish we would have known that they owned this land last time we met, so we could try to wield and deal for the public access there and trade lands, because it sounds like a lot better than what we got. But I think that it sounds like a reasonable request
Yeah, I'll make that motion that we approve it.
I'd second that.
Okay, motion by Randy, second by Mike. Call the question or discussion on the motion? No, call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimous. Jaylee, you good? Thank you.
She's saying,
Mike. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the next one now, number 5. Thanks, Chad, for bringing us back. And this is the variance, the Avintaquin Canyon variance. Chad, would you help us get familiar with this one?
Yeah, so that was pretty good timing on it. I apologize to Mike if getting mixed up on directions and stuff, but he's here now. So Avintaquin Canyon, this is going to be similar to the one that we just heard in that it's a non-contiguous piece that he's wanting to add to the CWMU. And I believe he received his letter. These maps that I have, I don't know if we can blow that up, but if you can see, between the two pieces is state land, right? Wildlife, it's our land, right? DWR land that divides his two pieces of property. So he's just looking to add that in as non-contiguous as well.
Okay, Mr. Vanderhoof, do you have anything you'd like to add about that? We've been giving operators 8 minutes to speak and explain, and then we'll ask you questions too.
So ask that again, sorry.
Oh, well, if there's anything you'd like to add to explain the variance you're requesting in addition to what Chad said, and then we may have some questions for you as well, so don't go too far. But we'll give you 8 minutes to speak, and you can say whatever you want to say during those 8 minutes, as
Okay,
long as it's
great.
productive.
Yeah, basically, it's just land that's about Derek just showed me the map. It's 900 yards away from our other piece. So the animals do kind of go back and forth between these pieces. It is a little bit higher up and it's at the end of a road. So, we don't have any roads going through it like some of our other pieces. So I think it's pretty good quality ground. We do see a lot of animals over there. We're probably a little bit unusual in our CWMU in that, we're basically a not-for-profit. Most of our tags that we do hunt with, we do it with veterans. We treat our public hunters that we have every year equal to our veterans. We honor both of them. They're very important to us. In fact, a lot of our public hunters have become our friends. In fact, just on the way in here, I just got a text from the deer hunter that we had this last year saying, hey, I just drew the bear tag. And I told him that if you draw the bear tag, you're welcome to come out. So, we really take pride in taking care of both our veterans and the public hunters. And I think by adding this 500 and some odd acres, it will just increase the opportunities. We're not asking for any more tags, just give us a little bit more ground that we can hunt and increase the opportunities up there.
Okay, so it looks like we've got the biologist here as well. Any questions on this one from the committee?
how big is the CWMU? Is it for elk as well?
Total acreage of the current CWMU? Derek, you have to go to the mic, buddy. Good job, Derek.
But it's less than 10.
What was the question?
The exact acreage.
9,480 something. Yeah, I think it's right around 9,500 total acres right now.
So does it have a variance for being undersized as it is?
Yes. So this would actually add acres and get us over the 10,000 mark as well, but it would not be contiguous.
Whereabouts is Avintaquin?
Excuse me, I couldn't hear you.
Where is Avintaquin?
It is
Mexico?
southwest of Duchesne.
Duchesne. Okay, thank you.
What's the because it was under acreage and we did grant that variance, what's the satisfaction rate? What's the harvest rate on your cows? Yeah, either or biologist or like.
For the public hunter, I know 2 years ago was our first year. He did harvest one. We were with the public hunter. This year, he passed up numerous bulls just because he was looking for a giant one. Deer hunt, we're 100%. Cow elk hunters, I don't know if you have that number.
You were 100% in 2022.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers, but generally in my mind, I know the ones that struggle, and this one's not one. I think they're pretty good.
Mike, I have their cow success in front of me on 7 permits. They were 100% success.
Yeah.
7 permits, 5 hunters went and hunted. So 2 did not hunt, and they were 100%. Derek, does that confirm what you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice work on the cows, Mike. Appreciate that.
You bet.
Keep it up. How big is the non-contiguous piece again?
Pardon?
How big is the non-contiguous piece? Did you say?
It's 520 acres.
Thank you.
And what is in between there? I mean, I can't, the map doesn't show, so who's the property owner in between that? Is it public or private, or? We are. Okay.
Mike, I like that the property is a nice blocky thing that looks like it could be hunted good, and I'm going to get the same commitment out of you, just assuming you're going to get a positive vote here out of our committee. But how are you going to help the public hunter hunt this thing as well and know that they've got access to it? Do you guide those public hunters as well? Help us understand that we're making a good decision about that piece.
Yeah, like I say, we take pride in our public hunters. And so we spend a full day driving them around the whole ranch and show every square inch of it to them and make sure that they've got keys to it all. They're always welcome to camp at the ranch house and stay there. If they need guide services, we help them. I helped at one of the cow elk hunters, and he looked at me this year. This is after he did jumping jacks. It's the first guy I've ever seen do jumping jacks after a successful hunt. And he says, "So am I supposed to tip you?" I go, "No, this is just what we do. We like helping you guys." And so, yeah, we take them all around the property, show them everything, show them the boundaries, and make sure they got keys to any gates that we do have.
Mike, do you allow guests? And if so, how many guests?
As many as they want to bring.
Thanks.
Any more discussion? If not, we're looking for a motion.
I move that we approve the addition of the 520 acres of non-contiguous land to this existing CWMU as described in the presentation.
I'll second that.
Okay, did you get the names? Scrubs and Tim. Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. With that, we're
Thank you,
through
gentlemen.
the variance requests, and we're going to take a short 10-minute break. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Restart.
Recorders are on again. You're live.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. With that, we're going to start back and we're into the complaint portion of the meeting. So in this portion of the meeting, we'll have Chad introduce the topic. Again, we have folks here from the division if we have any questions, but most of these have been vetted through Chad. And then we'll give the complainant some time. Stick with the same amount of time, up to 8 minutes to explain it. If there's somebody here to represent the CWMU, we'll give them the same amount of time. Allow the advisory committee to ask questions when and if they need to, and then some time to discuss and decide how they want to proceed. So with that, we'll start on agenda item number 6, the complaint against Riverview Ranches.
Okay, yeah, and on this one has taken some turns even today, so I'll just update you on kind of what's going on. Riverview Ranch was recently sold to a new landowner. Shorty was the operator during this last hunt under a different landowner. The landowner today told me that he wants to be the operator. Shorty's out of town, so he wasn't able to make it either way, but yeah, so he's going to take over those responsibilities of being the new operator. But the complaint was that it's a cow hunter and his wife that they reached out to Shorty to try to schedule a hunt, and every time that they reached out, Shorty, I guess, even told me, he said he forgot, like somehow they slipped through the cracks. Not necessarily that he forgot, but they slipped through the cracks, and he never scheduled them to come out. We even tried late January to get him out. The elk had left. So a lot of this is the complainant's not here either, but he's mostly hoping to try to get points back because he wasn't able to hunt. And so we're trying to get him through our error committee to see if that's possible. Yeah, so with that, I guess I'll take any questions on this complaint.
Chad, does Shorty run any other CWMUs?
No.
Okay. How many cows do they hunt on Riverview? And what was their success last year?
10. 80% success. Jim's going to come up here because he's, instead of hand signaling me the answers.
Jim Christensen, Northern Region Wildlife Manager. So there were 10 permits, 8 hunters, and it was all 8 that actually harvested.
And the 2 that didn't hunt
are these 2.
Couldn't get on.
Husband and wife.
So to address the bonus points, I know you have the error committee, but in the past, in these cases, our committee has voted to support something along those lines of receiving the points back when we feel that the hunter was aggrieved. And so has the errors committee taken that into account? How have they played with our recommendations in the past?
I can answer that, Chad.
Go for it.
There are just like a lot of our rules, there are really strict guidelines as to what constitutes a division error and what does not constitute a division error. And so there may be something that feels wrong and it's not allowed for in rule, or it doesn't constitute a division error. On this one, this is an error that the committee would hear. And I'm not saying they would or would not reinstate points, but I think that they would view a recommendation from the Senior Advisory Committee as just that, a recommendation, and take it into consideration.
Thank you.
I mean, in my opinion, this is a no-brainer to help the hunter out if we can. I certainly would like to have a chat with the new operator if we have that opportunity at some point to make sure they come in and we get them going in the right direction. Had it still been Shorty, he likely would probably get a probation from us. We know that mistakes happen, but I promised that his paid hunters were all called, and I promised they were all taken care of, and they all got to hunt. And if he didn't look at these hunts at the same level and the same value as the bull hunts, well, then he made a mistake, because they are as important, maybe more.
Has the CW ever had any other complaints?
Do you know that answer, Jim?
I do know the answer, and
Greg
yes,
takes-
we had one in 2019.
Wasn't that the neighbor though that was shooting the elk in the field and they wanted to let him be part of it?
As I remember,
Yeah, that's right.
there was a complaint for similar thing.
How long Shorty been the operator, Chad or Jim? Do you know?
So he was the operator as long as I remembered, and then with the previous ownership, they brought in a new operator for 4 or 5 years, and then Shorty took over again. I think it was just last year.
Got you. Okay.
Are they still in their core? Or what year are they in? Have they fulfilled that? Are they renewing?
Let me look that up real quick. I don't think they're in the big year. I think they did last year. So first hunt year was 2022.
So they're essentially in their first year. Now with the change of ownership, will they have to apply for a new core, or how will that work?
No, generally we just accept that. So last year would have been their first hunt year. So this fall would be their second year.
Okay.
And yeah, generally that just transfers over.
Okay.
That probably depends, Mike. There's probably more to that than that. We need to look into that. All right, there is the clause in the rule that talks about a percentage of land ownership changing hands. Some of that depends on if the entity, Riverview Ranch, is the same entity or not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask that is I would hate to have ownership change or something like that occur simply to sweep under the rug a violation.
Yeah, and I did speak to the new landowner today, and I don't think that was the case in this one. I understand what you're saying, but for this one, I don't think that was the case. He was unaware of it. Probably if it was earlier than noon today, he probably would have been down here to speak for it too, but he couldn't make that work with the late notice. But he seemed very eager to make sure things were running right and wanted them to run smoothly and correct, so.
Any more questions or further discussion?
I guess where my mind is, just food for thought, is if Shorty's out, any recommendation we make, the new landowner's going to inherit, correct? But I was just listening to Mike, and he says, well, he bought it, and if that's the case, then that will kind of make him fly right as we go out the gate. I don't think there's anything wrong. I'm probably leaning towards more of a probation, I guess, and have him come back in a year and make sure that all the future hunters that draw that CWMU are contacted and treated fairly, and that's kind of where my mind's at.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. And I mean, we might as well add to it that have the division do what they can to help this particular hunter out, right? But I'm feeling the same way. He should inherit the challenges that come with the CWMU, and that gives us a chance to talk to him next year and make sure we're going the right direction.
And I personally have a really hard time with just probation. served on this committee for so long, and I'm so tired of, we put a CWMU on probation that did something that's egregious. Like for some people, they draw a cow tag, and that's their big hunt for 2 or 3 or 4 years. And then the operator doesn't call him and doesn't call and tries his best to make contact. How frustrating would that be? And then we're going to say, oh, we're going to put them on probation. They'll have to come in, we'll talk to them, and we'll put a letter in their file. I mean, there's got to be a recourse for a CWMU that's egregious. If I'll just say this, if a CWMU operator did that to his private client and took his money, which the division took the guy's money, they'd be in court. And there would be lawyers involved. And it would be a serious offense. I mean, it could be, it's essentially fraud. I mean, so I don't, in this case, I think probation is way too lenient. I don't know what the right course of action is. Back in the olden days, we used to take the operator out and say, hey, you messed up with this guy. You better give him like a deer tag or a couple cow elk tags, or how are you gonna make it right to him? And I mean, I'll make a motion at the end of this that we recommend that the error committee reinstate these people's points, because the division is a partner in the CWMU program. They're the ones that are taking the guy's money. So that's the way I look at it. And maybe other people look different, but yeah.
In my mind, this was Shorty's mess up. And from what it sounds like, the new ownership has nothing to do with Shorty. I think we should recommend that the errors and omissions committee reinstate the points. I think that's the best outcome here. Punishing a CWMU that is totally different doesn't make, like the ownership, leadership, whatever is completely different, new operator. I just don't understand why putting them on probation makes sense, or doing, it's not their fault.
I got one more comment, and I think where Shorty's not involved currently, and they are inheriting the obligation for the CWMU, I'd like something in the motion that states that Shorty cannot in any way, shape, or form be involved as the operator. If something happens mid-year, and it sounds like he's kind of the go-to guy, if something, somebody doesn't do it, they call Shorty and he comes back in. I'd like it stated in the motion that he cannot operate this CWMU. That's kind of where my mind's at.
Now, this might be a question for Jim Christensen, but did I understand right on the cow tag numbers that they have 1 to sell and 9 public tags for their cows? 1 private.
I thought they were 100%.
100%?
Public.
Okay, so there were 2 people that didn't hunt. Oh, it was a husband. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm up to speed now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it tough because we don't have a private tag we can give them.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
You ready for a motion?
We'll take a motion.
I'm going to take the easy one.
Okay. Take this one slow. We're going to type as fast as we can.
Okay. Hunt and peck. So I move that we recommend that the error committee reinstate these hunters' bonus points due to the fact that they were never able to hunt, and due to the fact that the division is a partner with the CWMU in that hunt. They assume that obligation, yeah. Sure.
We have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Tim?
Mike, could you repeat the motion?
I don't have as good a memory as you.
I can summarize it if you'd like me to.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, you got to read it at the mic, Jayla. Yep.
To recommend the error committee reinstate the hunters' bonus points due to they were never able to hunt and due to DWR is a partner with CWMUs in this hunt.
That's the extent of the motion, nothing with reference to Shorty.
Just the one motion now.
Okay.
I felt like that was an important part of this, and so I wanted it as a standalone motion, so it couldn't be convoluted with anything else.
And you've had a second on that. I call for the question.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It's unanimous. It feels like there's another motion on this topic before we move on, so I'd entertain any other motions on this topic.
Okay, so I'll make the motion that we put the CWMU on probation, and it is, I guess, an addendum that Shorty not be allowed to be the operator regardless of circumstances on the CWMU for any reason. And that they come back next year for review in front of this committee.
Okay, we got a motion
I'll second that.
and a second. So motion by Mike, second by Randy.
To be clear, we're talking Shorty Williams.
Yes.
To be clear.
To be clear, on any other Shorty.
Can I just clarify, does that include any CWMU? Like, could Shorty go and operate another CWMU? Should we?
Can we get some clarification on the motion? What was the intent there,
make
Mike?
it so?
Initially, it was specific to this CWMU, but I think Mike makes a good point. I think without coming in front of this committee and asking for some sort of leniency down the road, I think it would keep him or prohibit him from being an operator on any CWMU, period.
So that's the recommendation of the committee. Do you accept the amendment on the?
Yes, second.
Would that be indefinite, or is that until he comes and pleads his case and begs and
I would say
grovels?
until he comes
Please, case.
before this committee, that would be until that point.
All right.
Okay, so we got a slight amendment to the motion and a second to the amendment. Not the second amendment, just a second to the
Second to
amendment.
the amendment, there's a minute.
All right, any discussion on the motion, further discussion? If not, we'll call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, it's unanimous. All right. Before we move on, any more motions on this topic, or we feel like we've covered it? All right, I'll take the silence as I think we've covered it. All right, Chad, can you introduce us the next complaint?
Yeah, this one's on Red Ranches in southeast Utah. I don't believe the complainant wanted this to come, but wasn't going to come to the meeting himself. But essentially what his complaint is that he drew a cow tag when he was hit the hunt dates that he was given. He said the elk were gone, ran into a cow herder or somebody at some point in time. He said, yeah, all the elk are in Colorado. So I don't know if David Rudd's here either. I don't think so. I recognize most people in here. So I don't think we have, again, the complainant or the CWMU operator here on this one. And I didn't hear back from Mr. Rudd of any explanation either of whether this was like a time that he generally allowed people to hunt and there's usually elk there and there just wasn't this year for some reason or what. But
That was the question I had, is where was Mr. Red's response? Where's Red Ranch's response? There's no response?
No, I have not heard. And this was through email, so maybe I should have called him too, but.
Mike, do you have antlerless harvest rate?
Covy's way better.
I can pull that up.
But I did look at that, and for the most part, they were pretty good with pretty good satisfaction. The success rates were a little bit varied, but I think it was always over 50%. Some years up to 90% with, I think, overall above a 4 satisfaction rating. Covy will correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm just bringing up percent success. They're antlerless. So they have 30 antlerless permits. This last year, they had 26 hunters, and 22 of the 26 harvested for 84%. I can look up the previous years and see what that is, if you'd like me to. So in 2021, internet feels a little slow here, sorry. Okay, in 2021, again, 30, it looks like 2,960, 55%, so lower success than the previous year. Let's go back one more year so we can look at a trend and see a 3-year trend. And in 2020, 26 hunters, 19, so 73%. So 73, 55, and 82, almost 83%. You know, we expect harvest to be higher, obviously, on CWMUs. Keep in mind, you know, public land hunt about 30%, but we expect the harvest to be higher on CWMUs. And this is good. Success rates are good. Can I say something before we go on? This is hard. These complaints we take seriously. I think the committee takes them seriously. And when there's no representation at this meeting from either the complainant or the CWMU, it's almost impossible to evaluate. You know, it's hard to understand emotion or sentiment through text. And when all we have are text and no representation, I would almost want to understand this one a little more, but it feels like we don't have something that's fair for the committee to evaluate. I'm speaking as obviously the non-voting chair, but I want to know what the committee thinks.
Well, that's the hard thing about Mr. Red not even responding, in my mind. If you're gonna have a complaint, you know there's a complaint, God, at least send an email. I mean, say something.
Have they ever had a complaint? I think that would speak to something. Like, has Red Ranches ever had a complaint? Do we know?
Not since I've been coordinator, but Greg takes really good notes. I've noticed that, Nate.
Not in the last 12 years.
In the last 12 years, they haven't had a complaint.
I agree with what Covy said. It's hard to analyze it. I also have a little bit of a different take on it, that if a public hunter takes the time to write an email and contact the division and go through those motions, they are representing themselves here. And for us to expect somebody, I don't know where Mr. Smith lives. If he lives in Monticello, or if he lives in Green River, I think it's too burdensome to expect that man to drive up here when he's already filed his statement. And so I also have a hard time, the hardest time I have, it goes back to Red Ranches. Do we know that Red Ranches knows about this complaint?
They've been emailed like everybody else with the email that's on file with their CWMU.
Okay, so they should, if that's the email on file, then they should know.
They should know.
So I have a hard time, I mean, that the CWMU doesn't even send the email like you said.
Do we give them the opportunity to appear through technology? Do we give everyone that tech?
Yeah, we're actually going to have one of them tonight that's going to come through. I don't know that I expressly stated that, hey, if you need, you can come through technology, but Mr. Smith was like, I don't know where he lives or anything, but I could tell he was very frustrated, but he also wasn't going to come to this meeting. I think he said his piece in his emails.
I think initially when I see this, I look down and think, well, if the elk weren't there, that's hunting. Sometimes that just happens. I don't think anybody's responsible for that. But without them here to represent themselves, were they given opportunity to come in when the elk were there? I mean, there's so many other things that would come into play in making a decision with this. It does make it difficult that nobody's here to represent either side of the story. So, but at first glance, you look at it and you think, well, the elk weren't there. That's a bummer. That happens. But we don't know what the circumstances are.
Mike, that's well said. And what we can draw from it, and I agree with all your comments, Covy, Mike Christensen, and Mike, but you guys are all right, I think. What we can draw from this, though, is that Red Ranches knows that there's a problem, and he's let somebody leave completely ticked off. Okay, maybe that is just because he had his 3 days to hunt and he wasn't able to be successful. Maybe it's because he couldn't hike. I don't know. Maybe it's because he couldn't shoot. We don't know. I'm not going to assume any of that. All I'm going to draw from it is what I know, and that is that Red is not here to defend it. And he didn't take the time to meet with Mr. Smith and do what he needs to do to pay the price of why he's got a CWMU and why he can hunt all those big bulls. He didn't take care of him. He didn't give him the experience that he's supposed to give him. And because we only a few people have the courage to come to this committee and talk with us about these problems, we need to jump on the ones when we have the opportunity. And I think Mr. Red needs to be standing in front of us next year, and he needs to be on probation, and we need to talk about it and find out what's going on.
And for the future, though, I'd like for the landowner at least to be notified via mail, possibly phone call as well, and via email. I mean, there's ways that they, emails, spam, whatever, doesn't answer them. At least for our property tax reviews, we make sure that they get at least 3 forms of contact. And if they don't respond to those, and then we know that hey, they've got a certified mail, they've got a letter, they've been contacted via phone, they still don't respond. And so I give a little bit leniency on that one because he's not here to respond to those questions, but I agree that, maybe a probationary that he can come back next year and be like, look, we didn't hear from you. We might find out a case of why I didn't get that email, make that bull crap excuse. Maybe he didn't, maybe he did. You never know, so.
Can I speak to that too, Randy? I think we could do better in this case, but I will say that this was mentioned before, that this program is a cooperative program. These aren't just citizens. They're individuals that often landowners that benefit from a public resource and work in conjunction with the Division of Wildlife. And so we hold them to a higher standard when they apply on an official application, we expect that email to be checked. We expect them to respond to us. We expect them to work with us. That's not saying we can't make a phone call, but it feels weird to be the babysitter of a program that we should be cooperative in. I know that if I send an email to Chad, as Chad's supervisor, and he doesn't respond to me, I probably would follow up with a phone call. But there's a standard that you hold your partners to, and then there's a standard you hold the general public to. And these are our partners in this management, and we expect them to, not just that we're responsive to them, but they're responsive to us. And we can do better at the same time.
I reviewed a lot of late appeals today, so I got a lot of excuses.
Can I just say one other thing? I think it's nice when we have contact information. We've called a lot, and I should have called David Red on this, but I've called a lot of complainants over the years. It's nice to have a phone number or an email from us so we can reach out and get a feel before the meeting as well. So I don't know, just for future, it'd be nice to have something.
And I think we can do that for the CWMU. We'd have to get permission, I think, with grandma rules for complainants that we post this is a public meeting. So that'd be, yeah, I'd probably just have to get permission, but I do like that idea.
Well, can we table this till next meeting, or can we just have them come back at the next meeting, or do we put them on probation so they come back in a year?
The thing is that you guys can make any motion you would like on the topic within reason. So.
What the division support? I think like Greg said, I think probation's reasonable. It's not going to hurt them at all, as I ranted before, but it'll force them to make an appearance and they can get their education hours or something. I don't know.
So, Mike, are you suggesting we put them on probation tonight, or that we table it and have them come back?
I think, yeah, I would put them on probation. Well, I'll make a motion. I move that we put Red Ranches on probation and have them appear before the CWMU committee next year to explain how they deal with their public hunters.
We got a motion by Mike.
I'll second that.
Second. Did you get that? Clint? Okay, any discussion on the motion? All right, if not, we'll call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Now, what about the other complaint that he wants his money back and points?
So I can speak to that. Again, this committee can recommend to the agency, but understanding the rule and what qualifies if you hunt, if you spend time in the field hunting, that's not something that we would consider or would be able to under rule. All right, Chad, we're on to some discussion on cow elk harvest.
Yeah, so this is one that I've wanted to put on the agenda for a really long time and felt like this needed to be discussed. It's been something I've been working on with the CWMUs about things that we can do, measurements we can put in to make it so we know if a CWMU is succeeding or not. I sent a lot of this out to, I think I sent it out to all the CWMUs saying these are the criteria that we're going to be looking at. And a lot of that was satisfaction ratings, success rate, if you're doing better than the surrounding units. And I got some feedback from that, and it wasn't necessarily pushback of like, we shouldn't do this, but I had a couple CWMUs really say, all right, we need to do this. Let's step up to the plate and get this done. And then they tracked their what happened that fall, and it was a little bit eye-opening for me as the coordinator to have a CWMU operator say, we threw everything at this. We offered our guides a whole bunch of money to guide these people. We did everything in our power. We were going to make them all successful. And we have like more than 8 people say, it's really not that important to me. I don't care that much. Not show up. They felt very handicapped, I guess, as far as not being able to get their harvest because of, I guess, uncooperation from public hunters. I mean, it's their right of whether they want to hunt or not, but they felt like they were getting penalized from it. Also had a conversation with one of our ex-employees that actually started guiding for a CWMU. And that conversation was very eye-opening to me too, because we had lots of conversations when we were both biologists together about cow harvest and let's make these CWMUs get it done. And he said to me, he's like, Chad, it's way different than I thought it was going to be. This is way more difficult and harder than I thought. And offered for me to come up with him this fall to see for myself. And I guess what I'd say with that background and us looking at these metrics is I think we still have more work to do on this. I think I need to be up on the mountain. Biologists need to be up on the mountain during these times because it's a complaint that we hear from a lot of CWMUs saying, I just don't have the cow elk on me. They're not there. I'd love to help, but I don't want to drive the last 15 cows that I have on my place away. And I think as a division and as biologists, we've looked at just pure numbers of how can you be 1,500 or 2,000 elk over objective and not as a unit, not as a CWMU, but as that unit, and not have enough elk to harvest. And I would say that for me as a biologist, that's the way I felt. As a coordinator, that's the way I felt until these conversations during this last year. So I think on this that it's not, I also think there's probably CWMUs out there that could take more, that have the ability to harvest more, that the elk are there. I want to use caution as far as not just lumping all the CWMUs in together into one boat saying, well, because of these numbers, you should be able to kill this many, or you should be able to do that, but do take it more on an individual basis. So on this, I mean, we're welcome to discuss and throw out ideas, but I do think before we have recommendations or anything, that you give me a year to work through some of these, get on the mountain with CWMUs, see it for myself, and then next year come back with some recommendations.
I think this is one of the things that we've realized as we run this program more cooperatively every chance we get, that is just to add a little bit to what Chad said, and that is that there are times, again, when people really are doing all they can. And to issue more permits doesn't mean more harvest. I think this is one of those things that we probably need to look at. Are there other tools or other ways or other things we can do to manage to our unit population objective, especially in these units that are dominated by CWMUs, and how we work together? And I think that's, in Chad and my discussion, that's what we're asking for, is give us this year. We'll work with you all as the CWMU Advisory Committee. We'll work with the CWMUs, and we'll come up with maybe some tools that still allow for this public opportunity, but also can accomplish the goal, because our percent success is good. If you look at CWMU statewide, our percent success is double on average that of what is on public land. Our problem isn't percent success. Our problem is getting the harvest we need to maintain population objectives on some of the units. And there's another part of this, and the other part is that in order to have a good partnership, it has to be something that's financially, it has to be good for the division, good for the public, and good for the landowner. And there are times where it's good for the division and good for the public, but maybe not good for the landowner. There are also times when it's good for the landowner and good for the division, but maybe not as good for the public. So, but we need all three of those to have a successful partnership. And so that's one of the things we need to evaluate. Are there tools that can be good for everyone, accomplish this, and still maintain a financially viable CWMU that's good for the landowner?
Just a quick question, and you guys will know better than I do, of course, but is there a possibility, and maybe it's just too late in the game when somebody doesn't show up, and at the discretion of the CWMU operator working in conjunction with the division to call up an alternate? If it doesn't mean something to somebody, and if they haven't spent any time on the mountain, that would negate, if they've hunted, then it would be impossible, but to call up an alternate and bring them into somebody that really wants to kill a cow, you get on the phone with those that put in for that permit and give them the opportunity to go shoot an elk. For those that maybe can't make it or chose not to come? Or is it just too late in the game at that point to try to roll to an alternate and move somebody else up on the hill? The person that drew loses their points because they chose not to go. Does it convolute it? Does it muddy the waters?
I wouldn't dare answer it, but I think it's a discussion we could have with Lindy. I mean, that's an example of one of the tools we could talk about. And so, but I've learned over the past 15 years to not answer for licensing.
I was gonna say, could you also extend the season? Maybe give a little bit longer dates, or?
I don't know. No, we actually can't, because a CWMU can hunt cow elk from August 1st to January 31st. So during any time that we hunt cow elk on the landscape, they can hunt cow elk. And so we're not going to go into February. There are too many sentiments there. And harvesting before August, also probably a bad idea.
So, and to back that up a little bit, I was looking at some of the stuff, and I was looking at some of the ones that struggled with satisfaction ratings, and maybe their harvest wasn't so good. I also looked at average days hunted, and most of the times they were allowing well over the 3 minimum. A lot of times their hunters were going out for 5 days. So it wasn't a lack of trying to get the public on the mountain and trying to get the harvest. There's just other factors that are limiting it.
I like the idea that Mike had, if you could pull in alternates. It is interesting, though, that on our general season deer hunts, like 20 or 30% of the hunters don't even hunt. And so that's probably part of the permit allocation game there a little bit. Have you looked at average dates of harvest? Like that's something that comes to my mind. Like maybe the CWMUs need to be forced to hunt elk when the elk are there and available a little bit more than, because some CWMUs have elk on them, until January 31st, but others, they move off or they behave differently.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I don't know if we have that data. I've never looked at that data, so I don't know that it's there if it says when they harvest. But that was part of the division employee that I was talking to. He said, come up in September. We'll come up in September and I'll show you around the ranch and we'll look and see how difficult it is to find elk. So his offer wasn't for after season or anything. It was like, this is when we all thought all these elk were going to be just all over the place. And that might just be, that CWMU, but I think it's worth analyzing and looking at.
I think it's great to go get firsthand knowledge, and I'm sure you'd like to be on the mountain more than in these meetings.
Yeah, that's my real motivation behind it is like, yeah, I just need to spend all fall on CWMUs instead of in my office.
Chad, do pretty much all of the elk CWMUs have cow tags?
The vast majority do. Not all of them do, but it's probably 90% or higher.
Okay.
I think with that, what we're asking the committee here for is just some time. And if they're okay with that, we'll probably move on from this one. Okay. I don't see anybody shaking their head no, so chat on to the next discussion topic with the committee. It says that CWMUs can set reasonable rules, and we wanted to have this discussion about a few things here, is like what is reasonable?
Yeah, and so this one, I don't know, I guess maybe I'll lead with this before we dive too much into this. There is legislation currently that the number one thing on this, on the agenda says number of guests, and the next one is guide fees. There's current legislation that has it written in it that you would have to allow one guest for free that you can charge for. So I guess I'll just lead with that, as that part of this discussion may at least partially be fixed with legislation. I don't know if fixed is the right word. I guess that depends on perspective, but and I know that there's been talk in the past that I've had in RAC meetings or with other people of whether that one guest minimum is enough or not. But I guess with that being said, I'll leave it to you guys to ask questions or comments on any other rules that you think we may need a tweak, or any comments. Yeah.
Chad, what do you mean by equity?
So this one would probably get addressed too. For that one, and I'm glad you brought this up because somebody else brought it up to me before this meeting, and I wrote this quite some time ago, and it took me a minute to remember why I wrote equity. But there was at least a CWMU that had it, that they were charging for the guest unless the hunter was a female. I think it was a female or elderly, or like special circumstances.
Any glamour characteristics to the female?
No, they didn't say that. But
okay, I'm just curious.
But yeah, it was. I felt like that one could get us in trouble as far as, equality is. Like, so if you're a guy, you have to pay for your guest, but if you're a youth, then you you get one for free. And I get where they're coming from, but I don't know that we can do that.
So what are you asking us on this topic?
Just if there's really, do we want to discuss this more? Do we want to discuss how many guests, or do we want to wait and see where legislation falls? And are there any of the other rules that are listed in the CWMUs that give heartburn, or you see potential? You've heard feedback from the public.
So I have been waiting like 6 years to discuss this topic. So I have to be home before midnight. So
Maybe we should do this
let's
last.
roll. I'm actually kind of serious, not on the timing. I mean, there needs to be, I mean, do you want us to start throwing out things, or how do you want us to do this?
Yeah, just whatever ideas or discussion that we can have that are potential changes we can make to this rule.
Well, I think that, I mean, legislation may or may not pass. It looks like it probably will from my limited understanding, but if it doesn't, I think that there needs to be I have a hard time putting well, it doesn't matter, legislators will dictate that, but there should be a minimum of at least one guest. And I would even say on a cow, or I mean, not a cow, but an elk or a moose hunt, that should be higher. Like if my dad drew his moose tag and he could only take one guest, like me and my brother going to fist fight over who's going to go pack the moose out. You know, I mean, there's got to be some equity and some common sense there. And I've heard firsthand stories over the years of people who had moose tags and they could only take one guest. And then, you know, the one person could pack it out. You know, a guy and his wife's helping, and women are strong. I'm not saying that, but that's a big task. So I almost think that on elk and moose, it should be higher. I went to the CWMU Association. They showed a video, and I loved the video, except what I hated about the video was the hunters were there, and they were alone with the guide. So there needs to be more guests allowed than even just one on certain hunts. And that's my opinion. There can be rules that they have to stay together, and you know, how many you can fit in your, you know, ATV or SUV or car or whatever you're hunting out of. You know, I don't think it's fair to have the public show up with 15 guests and, you know, hit every corner of the ranch on four-wheelers, but common sense things.
Mike, just to capture what you said, make sure we capture it and take this back as feedback. So what you're saying is a minimum of one guest on probably antlerless hunts, and then but when it's a special hunt, like either a bull moose, buck deer, or bull elk, which are all limited entry hunts, you'd prefer if it were more. What's a recommendation as to more? What does that look like?
Well, to backtrack, I would say like on a cow elk hunt, you know, there should be more than one guest allowed. You know, it's a large animal. It takes deep. Yeah, I mean, deep snow, unguided. These people are up there and they shoot an elk, you know, a couple miles from the truck, and they've got, you know, I mean, a wife or a kid and an older person. I mean, it takes more effort to get that animal out than one guest on paper. So, you know, I mean, I would say on the larger species, elk and moose, there should be more than one guest allowed. In my opinion, should be however many can fit inside the one vehicle that they're allowed to take on the property.
I agree with Mike. I mean, you know, hunting's always been a family thing, right? And you draw a limited entry tag, good grief, the whole neighborhood's going to go on some of those hunts. And I'm not saying that's what it needs to be, but part of hunting is sharing that with you know, your loved ones, your family, your, you know, buddy or whatever. So I agree with you, because I mean, this is equivalent to drawing a limited entry tag. And I'm not saying you need to have somebody sitting on every ridge with a radio. Not that would ever happen anywhere, but no. But yeah, I agree. It's definitely hard, not only from a packing the animal out standpoint, but just the what hunting really is and that legacy that we're trying to build and keep going, right? You're trying to get kids involved. You're trying to get everybody else involved so that it's still something that's going to keep going for generations. So I think having more people involved keeps that going.
Go ahead, Mike.
I've been involved in guiding and stuff like that, and it always seemed that if they stayed together and if the CWMU implemented a rule that they weren't riding ATVs all over, which most of those guys have rules like that in place, so they're not displacing game anyway. If the CWMU is not incurring a cost by having them there, and I know some CWMUs, they put our hunters up, the public guy, maybe they stay on the ranch. If there's a cost incurred by the CWMU, it's understandable that there would be a limitation or that they would have to come up with whatever it costs to feed them or whatever. I don't know what's included. But I think for the most part, if there's no cost incurred by the CWMU, I like Mike's idea about those that would fit in one vehicle coming, because Mike said elk and deer or elk and moose, but sometimes somebody's waited 10 or 12 years to draw a deer or more to draw a deer tag, and they've got two brothers or similar circumstances. So I kind of like the one vehicle, but I also want to be sensitive to cost incurred by the CWMU. I'm not asking for it to impact their business by having extra people there, and they can implement rules on how those people stay together that work best for both parties. I think that's kind of where my mind's at.
I like all the sentiment. I think I totally agree with Mike that on a moose hunt, you should be allowed to have more than one guest. Being on some moose hunts in my life. But one thing, being an operator and guiding on CWMUs for the last 20 years, it is pretty frustrating to have a public hunter show up that has never called you prior to putting in. And that I think there is something that the public hunter should, because there's plenty of CWMUs that allow a truck full of people. And that experience is probably as good as the other CWMU that doesn't. And now I do think we should put this in rule, but the public has a responsibility to gather information as well. And I don't get phone calls anymore. I don't. As an operator, I very rarely get a phone call before people put in for hunts. It's just changed.
I like the sentiment that Clint expressed about the heritage of hunting with your family and friends. I don't know if the truck full is right. I would think maybe 103 up to 3 guests on the big species, and for maybe deer and antelope 2 guests or something. But keep it simple.
Can I say one other thing on that too? One thing to consider is it takes a lot of gear to go on a hunt, and filling up the truck is pretty hard. But I think having 3 guests and having some space inside, because you're not going to want to throw it all in the back necessarily. I don't know. It's just a thought. There's a lot of gear, optics, rifles, you don't necessarily want it out in the weather.
I would say, if there's just a minimum number that is legislated, I think there's a lot of CWMUs that would cooperate. I mean, I've experienced stuff with CWMUs and it's been great. And I had more than one person. And I don't know if that's the issue. I think what we would need to do is just say, hey, this is a minimum that we should try to have. And at the same time, you're going to have people who show up with nobody. But
for the record, I just want to state that I wasn't suggesting a minivan or a van full of people. And I think it goes to what Tim said about communication. Some hunts would probably allow for 3 guests or 4 guests. Some wouldn't allow, maybe it's a more rugged type hunt, more remote. Maybe it only allows for 1 or 2. I think communication with the operator is probably key, because they can work that out between them prior to the hunt ever happening. And as long as the public guy feels like he was treated squarely, then I don't think there would be an issue. That's kind of where my mind's at.
I would throw in, if I can real quick too, is there probably needs to be something for protections on CWMUs on the other side as well. Because I do get feedback from CWMUs that I have this, and some of them are liberal. Like I'll allow 3 or 4 guests and they show up with 3 different vehicles. And I don't know that CWMU operators have the ability to handle that very well, right? Like if they're there and the damage is done. So I think when we when we talk about this, that we probably need to think about when the public violates that, of what happens then.
Yeah, I think there's avenues for CWMU to remove a hunter if they're violating their CWMU rules, isn't there? And so if it was in rule.
Yeah, they can. I think there's, and maybe it is just education on CWMUs saying, look, if you're not okay with this, call the DWR and let us step in. And I have told them that, like, I've told them that personally. So maybe it is more education on that end.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, as a public land hunter, I think it's awesome to be able to have that access to that land. That doesn't mean that I get to bring everybody and their dog and say, okay, you go over here, you go over there, you go over here, I'm going to go over here. Let's canvass this whole area. I don't think that gives me that right. And I don't think I need to be treated that way. So I agree. I don't think we need to have 3 trucks going in or showing up at the gate.
Yeah, so I have another one, if we want to move on to something else. Are we good, Covy?
Are we going to make some motions on it?
Oh, are we going to, you want motions?
I don't know. What are we going to do here? So we're not wasting everybody's
Cody,
time.
do we need to make motions on these, or are we just taking this under?
Well, I think we need it summarized. So I don't know that we need a motion, but we need a summary. And what I want to summarize this and make sure I capture the sentiments of the committee. And if we want to make a motion, we can. But the summary is that there's definitely a sentiment that there needs to be, and what this comes down to is I think we're dealing with some CWMUs that are charging pretty high fees to bring a guest. So I don't know if there's anybody that's saying absolutely no, but there are some that, yeah, you can bring a guest. It's $1,000 a day. And that's something that most public hunters just can't afford. And so it limits the public hunters as to what CWMUs they even want to or desire to apply for. And so what I'm hearing from the committee is there needs to be probably some minimums set, but also that there needs to be communication from the public to that CWMU to understand what type of hunt it is and who they would bring. And I think the minimums are a good idea, and we can do that in rule with the help of code in this case, probably. And if we want to put that in form of a motion, that I'm fine with that too.
Does the rule not have any conditions for guests right now? It doesn't, does it? I've been looking through mine. I can't see it.
I don't
None.
know.
One other thought, just to consider while we are doing this for our committee's sake, I happen to work on a CWMU that does not allow any private vehicles on it, and everybody has to be guided. So if you say you can bring a whole truckload of people, that'd become very, very difficult to guide, 3 or 4 cow elk hunters coming out, getting after it. We'd have 15 trucks that guides would be driving around. But we, in this particular case, this is one of the CWMUs that does a good job making sure that the public hunters are taken care of. I just want to say that, yeah, definitely I am all for some minimums, and perhaps those need to be in rule. But let's put considerations in for something that would work for all cases.
And I think that's why I don't know that it would be beneficial to do a motion, because we should just be giving you like sideboards and, kind of showing you what we think. And then, maybe down the road when we really discuss it, like this is what we're coming back with. Okay, then we can make motions on that. That's how I envision it.
I like that.
I second that motion.
Are there other aspects of the rules or equity that you'd like to discuss?
Yes.
Thank you.
Another one is, I know of CWMUs that have check-in and check-out times. And some of those check-in times are late enough in the morning that there's no way that hunter could get across that CWMU and before daylight. And I'm sure, because I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that CWMU is probably having their guides go out and scout and glass and at first light. So I think that our check-in, check-out times, I don't know how to fix it. Yeah, it needs to be consistent with normal hunting conditions. Yeah, like, I mean, if you got a book, you sign in the book, and you've got to, you can show up, I mean, a 5,000 acre CWMU might be a little bit different than a 150,000 acre CWMU. But I just really find that part of it, and these are all things that I've heard firsthand from hunters over the years. So I don't know how you're going to fix that, Chad, but they can't have sign-in time at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning.
Mike, I actually think that one's already addressed in rule under the CWMU management plan. A detailed explanation of how comparable hunting opportunities will be provided to both private and public. And so if there's a check-in time that's late in the afternoon or late in the morning that wouldn't allow you to get to the spot you're going to hunt, they would have to hold their private clients to that same thing. And so there is something in rule there. If we know that's where that's happening, we could definitely enforce something now.
But like Mike's saying is, if they've got their outfitter out there glassing, I can sleep in. He can say, hey, found him, let's go.
But that's
so
not
how are you going to regulate that?
That's not a comparable hunting opportunity then.
But if you want to get down to the comparable hunting opportunity, then why does a private tag holder get more than 5 days and the public tag holder only get 5? I mean, that comparable opportunity is really ambiguous, is what I'm trying to say. So I think that, I understand what you're saying. I don't know that comparable hunting opportunity really has ever had any teeth.
And I'm saying that I think in this case specifically, I understand the 5 days a minimum, so it's a comparable hunting opportunity with a minimum at this point. But and maybe you're right here, but I'm speaking for the agency now, and it's the agency. If somebody's not getting that, all right. Anybody who's hunted big game knows if you're not in the right spot at first light, you're wasting your time. It's the most important part of the hunt, right? And so this is something I absolutely want to address.
Yeah, and that's why it's important enough to me that I don't know how we address it. The CWMUs have been notified of that. The divisions listened to this complaint before, and nothing's happened in 4 or 5, 6 years. So, I mean, that's why I bring it back up.
If I can interject, maybe it is something that we say, because I see a couple issues. One of the others is, do they really have 5 full days if they can't get there in time the first morning? And maybe that's what we say is with that the full 5 days, you have to allow the public hunter to be in the spot that he wants to be in by first light. So if that means 4:30 in the morning that he's leaving and getting on the ranch, then it's 4:30 in the morning. And maybe that's how we can just clarify that a little bit, saying it's a full 5 days that they're in the spot they want to be in at first light.
Yeah, I think that's common. That makes sense to me. And something you guys can hammer out and think about more.
Yeah.
Another one is, like, I know that there's CWMUs that use ATVs and UTVs, and they don't allow the public to use those. And I think it's really puts a lot of pressure on a public person to show up in their truck to drive up a road that the UTV's been driving up and down. UTV access is a lot different. That goes to comparable opportunity too. But this is I know that that ATVs and UTVs issues come with those. I just think that I think it puts a lot of burden on a public person to have to drive their new pickup up the road when the UTV's driving up the road with them, but it's the landowner, the guide or outfitter. And I'm not gonna give any specific CWMUs in these examples, but I've heard that from multiple CWMUs about multiple CWMUs.
Mike, do you see that disparity within the gender? For instance, a bull elk hunter, public versus private, or do you see it more on the antlerless?
Well, so one example I had was Well, one example I remember was antlerless elk hunters, and they showed up in November in their pickup truck, and they couldn't make it up the roads because the UTVs have been, the tracks, the wheelbase is different, and it creates more issues. And that's just one example. I know of a buck hunter that he showed up and he was in his car, and they told him he had to drive his car. He had borrowed a four-wheeler, but he had to drive his car, and he ended up killing a deer. But still, it just seems comparable. And in both of those cases, they saw people driving UTVs or ATVs. I don't know who they were, but I imagine that somebody associated with the ranch if they're on the private property.
I think sometimes, though, that is the ranch, not the hunting operation. It's the ranch. I mean, that happened on when Steve Peterson on Cedar Canyon. He was buzzing around on his side-by-side, but we didn't use them, and couldn't. So I think some of that, obviously the ranchers are living under different rules than the hunting operation.
Yeah, but it's a partnership, and that landowner's making money off of the partnership. And some, I've been on enough ranches that some of the main roads are pretty good roads, but you get on a lot of those side roads, they're a lot sketchier, and they get overgrown because the wheelbases of the UTV or ATV are narrower, and it's a cooperation, and like that landowner that you just described, I'd imagine he's cashing checks.
Well, what I'm saying is he's not hunting, he's checking cattle.
Yeah.
It's an agricultural use, not a hunting recreational use.
And I understand that, but the examples that I'm giving, Tim, aren't just the guy going out and checking his cows. They're so, well, maybe some of them could be, but others aren't, so. I don't know, maybe that's not a big issue. Same with, let's see. Some guys are given, so have we changed the rule now to where the 5-day hunt in November, they have to give a full 5 days, or is it still just, they have to let them hunt in November?
It still just says that they have to allow a hunt in November. When I talk to CWMUs, I tell them if your private guy gets 5, you need to allow 5 in November. But some of them say, my private guy gets 2 days. Why do I have to allow the public 5 days? So,
yeah, that's a tough one because we're going off people's words and stuff. I know of CWMUs that give 1 day. You can hunt the last 4 days in October and the first day of November. I have a hard time with that. To be honest, that's not comparable. I don't know how you change that or if you change that, but that's.
I think too, a lot of these issues, Mike, and I think they're valid. I really do. Like, these are valid concerns if they're happening and when they happen. But I think and I get some people don't want to make a complaint, which is hard, right? We wish maybe they did when these things happen. But I think that's what this body is for, is to hear these issues and for us to say, is this, because the only way to really know if it is comparable is to ask questions to that operator, and know how does your operation work? And so I don't think these are huge, egregious things. I think, maybe we should talk about them. Greg just whispered in my ear, maybe it is one of us goes before the association for our continuing ed and talk specifically about these issues. Hey, is the comparable hunting thing fair? And give these situations, are you allowing 5 days for your private and you're only allowing your public 1 day? I don't know. I mean, that's probably not the greatest idea, but making rules for everything you're gonna make this rule pretty convoluted at some point.
Well, so just to speak to that, I was invited by the CWMU Association to speak before them, and I spoke about these very things, and none of them changed on the CWMUs that I knew of. And so we're years into the process of educating people who have had CWMUs for decades. And it's an unfortunate thing that we have to have rules. I don't like rules, but there's a reason why the legislature is forcing are gonna put into law that you have to have one guest, when we've talked about guests for years. If we would have handled it in-house on this advisory committee, the legislature wouldn't be putting that into law. So that's my point. I think most CWMUs do a really good job. I'm a champion of CWMUs, but when you're making people check in at 6:30 in the morning and sun comes up at 7:15, you know, and they've been told multiple times, then we have to do something about it, in my opinion.
Going back to the ATV, UTV thing, I mean, the thing that's hard about that is, I mean, I think about private landowners and what's really, back in the day when I was a kid, I remember people let you hunt all over the place, and then people started destroying people's land. So I understand them saying, yeah, no, I don't want you here, or having those guidelines. I do think that it does need to be fair. Maybe there's a rule, you know, obviously everything stays on the trail, on the road, which the operator should be able to regulate that. But I do kind of agree with Mike with having those limitations. There are roads that people aren't going to be able to get a pickup down that other people have access to with other tools.
Yeah, one of those, they offered a pack out service, so you could pay them money, and then they drive their four-wheeler down the road, and they couldn't access. So that just, I don't know. It feels wrong to me. Maybe I'm the only one in the room.
No, I guess the way I look at it is if I draw a limited entry tag, right, I have access to do things. I can't afford to go pay an outfitter. I mean, there's a reason that I think the CWMU program is awesome, and that's because it gives me an opportunity to hunt something I'm not going to be able to, you know, hunt more than likely. And so, you know, those rules need to be there to help the sportsmen out as well as, I mean, because, you know, they're not going to make sure, they're going to make sure they're not packing some animal out on their back for 6 miles where I might have to, unless I pay them money.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I've got one more, and then I'll be quiet for a while. And this was just texted to me earlier this month. Public hunters being forced to hunt together. I have a hard time with that one. So if my wife draws a tag, and you know, and we go out and hunt, and then we're forced to hunt with another person. So I think that that's wrought for failure and bad things to happen, like who gets to shoot first and who gets, you know, how safe is the other hunter? When we force people strangers to hunt together, I think that's probably not the best idea.
Especially if I can't bring a guest, but I have to hunt with some other fetcher that drew a tag.
Yeah.
That I don't know.
These people, they were able to take guests, but I was told that the guide or outfitter said, hey, you know, we'll take the hunters down and shoot the animals and while you guys wait back. And so, and then as imagined, I mean, it was a mess.
I think that.
Can I say one, Covy? I have one I want to add. And this isn't just because I'm on the other side of all this, but I think CWMU should be able to complain against public hunters. I think there should be a complaint process and then there's some sort of list where you know that these are ornery hunters or something. Yeah, problematic hunters, because I think that exists as well, you know, and people are looking for us to make a mistake as CWMUs. So anyway.
Hey, Tim.
There's no recourse.
I agree with that 100%, Tim.
Welcome to public service.
I love it.
No, I agree with you 100% on that one, Tim, because there are some jerks out there.
The fact of the matter is, you're right, and that's not the way that it works. Because when we talk about we're in this together and cooperative and collaborative, as a public servant at that point, we are held to a different standard. And by we, I mean the big we, all of us. And a lot of times We have to deal with things that aren't quite fair, but that's just how it is. So I just want to be, I don't see that ever happening. You can do that. You can do that with each other.
Aren't the public a part in this partnership though as well?
They are, but as public servants, we're held to a different standard. And our standard is, we'll hear this, we'll be able to defend ourselves, but I don't see us ever bringing forward, complaints against members of the public. To speak to your last one, and a lot of what you brought up, and I don't know how we do this, but these are individual isolated situations that we need to get here and have the committee here. And so these are one of these things that, we've talked about different ways that these can come through the division. When a member of this advisory committee hears things like this, please help us. Please help us so that we can call. Because if we can't ever have this one-on-one discussion of, hey, can you see that it's a really bad idea to take out 2 public hunters? And we've all tried the old 1, 2, 3, but it never works, right?
Well, I mean, it's not just an isolated incident, though, because one of your flagship CWMUs does the same thing, where they take out multiple hunters with one guy.
Let's get them in here and let's have the discussion. I think that these are things that we honestly need to talk about.
Thank you all for listening to me, and I only went on for 30 minutes, just for the record.
I think your list was pretty good. Thank you. Jayla, did you write down every word that Mike said? Appreciate it.
Mike, the other Mike Christensen has it recorded. I was saying the other Mike Christensen's got it recorded, so we can listen to that as much as we want.
Well, I've got one more for Tim. And so being a kind of more on the public representation side, I know that there's a lot of banter out there about permit splits. And I think the 90-10 is great for CWMUs that work well and work together and offer great opportunity. I don't know that it should just be a given, though. Especially one of the heartburn things that I've heard over the years is when, especially on elk. So if they choose if they get 5 elk tags, and they give 5 bull elk tags, they give 1 to the public, 4 to the private. They can choose the 80-20 split and then get is it 100% of the cow tags or like 80% of the cow tags? So
No, they never get more than 50% of cow tags. So I think on that one it's like 40% and 60% to the public. If they do a 75-25 split, then it's a 50-50 on antlerless.
Okay. All right. Then I'm kind of wrong there. I don't know. I don't know how you ever get that cat back in the box, but that's just something, we've all heard it. I think it needs to be at least stated in this committee for the public record. So
Going along with that, Mike, something I would like to see is limited entry units inside limited entries treated different on the split, because they don't have the option of just saying, I need this many tags. It's dictated by the state. And I think that split should be a true split. If they can only get 5 tags and they give 1 to the public, they're giving a bigger percentage to the public. So I think that's something that should be looked at when you're inside a limited entry unit as well.
Probably worth considering when we put somebody on probation, a CWMU on probation, that maybe they change the split to an 80-20 or something like that. It'd be a useful tool to fix that. One thing I certainly would like to say before we get done with this discussion, though, is, and for the benefit of a lot of the public that are listening right now and all of us here, this is our committee's job, is to do stuff like this. You're going to come to these meetings thinking that we're just a bunch of negative Nellies. And the reality is this is a very, very good program. And all of us up here know that and believe it and trust it and love it. And if you're listening to this and you're not really one of those people that are out there benefiting from CWMUs, well, that's on you. And that's unfortunate, because there's a lot of people that do. And I guide folks every year that have have drawn multiple CWMU tags and had great experiences in a lot of different places and are really having some great success as a public hunter on these private lands. So it's a great program, and these tweaks are meant to make it even that much better.
I totally agree, Greg. It sounded like I've been pretty negative, and I agree with what you said. One more thing on the, is it mandated in rule that that CWMU has to give a day to the public hunter to be able to come and visit the ranch? Is that mandated in rule? I don't
think so.
I don't think so.
It's not.
So that's actually a benefit that I can see where you could control the public hunter a little bit, where, you'd have to somehow have like maybe 1 or 2 days. So it couldn't just be on one day, but where the public has to be able to come to the ranch and be familiar with the roads and the rules and the expectations and meet. And, if they come and they show up and do that, then they get 5 days. And if they don't come, then they only get 4 days. It would be an encouragement for them to cooperate both ways, so everybody's kind of more on the same page. I think that if I had a CWMU, I would have a day or two in the summer and just say, come up at 8 and, we'll show you around the ranch. You can go around the ranch. You can, learn the roads a little bit. You're not just showing up in the dark on opening day. And then here's the rules. You have to abide by these rules. I know that that's probably onerous on a few CWMUs, especially ones with, a lot of permits. But yeah, some are doing it voluntarily, but I just think that Well,
I think that's where that communication piece comes in, right? We're talking about how a lot of these problems and issues could be alleviated if the hunter's reaching out. If, you get the packet from the CWMU, but if hunters take a little bit of initiative, I think that definitely would solve a lot of the problems that we do have, and being able to have a conversation beforehand, because when you're going in blind or you just read a packet going, okay, here's my rules, you probably have some ideas that you're hoping and praying that, well, if I show up, like the example earlier, you show up at the gate. Now what is the operator going to do? Okay, well, 7 of your guys have to go home. That's not a good situation or position for the operator to be in. So I do think that it'd be good to have something where communication is in the rules, or there's a benefit to having that.
Yeah, and I think that, if that day was set in their, in their management plan in the Corps, then it'd be known. And when they went to apply, licensing could actually have this window pop up and it would say, you have to go to this day. Don't you think, Covy, that licensing would like that?
They're always asking for more pop-ups.
That's what I thought. But I don't know. I think that's something worth looking into myself.
I think we've got a lot of good feedback on this. Feels like there's a few areas we can work on and some individual things we can address with operators and CWMUs. With that, I'd recommend that we move on to the next agenda item, review of last year's complaints.
Okay, yeah. So we had a few from last year. They've waited a long time tonight, so you finally get your turn. So hopefully we can move on. So the first one on our list is Buckhorn Ranch, and I sent out to everybody what the decision that was made last year. So just as a quick refresher, Buckhorn Ranch was the operator who is here tonight, was hunting elk, which is a deer-only CWMU, but he's hunting elk on other property that was outside the CWMU, essentially trespassing. Last year at this time, when we talked about it, there was charges, but there wasn't any finality to that case. To update you, there has been, and I hope I get this right, I'm sure he'll correct me if it's wrong, but I think it was a plea of no contest or plea in abeyance to attempt to take wildlife. That sound right? Okay. So that's what's happened in the meantime between last year to this year. I think there was other stipulations in there about posting the land. My computer is about to die, so I was trying not to use it. But yeah, you guys have seen the report that I sent out, so that's kind of where we're at here, and they're just called back to report on that. So I kind of feel like, do I tell them to come up or do you, Covy?
Well, it looks like in this case, we have both the complainant and the operator here. Do we have any questions about the completion of the terms of probation? One, and then now we held off on this to make any motions because of the current criminal case, but we're past that. So we need to decide what we want to do moving forward as a committee. So I think really this is, we're very familiar with what it was. Everybody was here last year, except for one. You're getting familiar with it right now. But I think it's more of questions. And Chad, do you remember all the terms? I know one was that it was posted.
Yeah,
and
let's
signed.
see. Put Buckhorn Ranch on probation for failure to know and mark the boundaries of the CWMU. The committee's vote was 5 in favor, 3 opposed. 3 opposed were in opposition because they didn't think the punishment was stiff enough. The committee asked that Buckhorn Ranch come back in 1 year and report on how this was fixed.
So I think this is the opportunity for the committee then to ask about the terms of this and how things went and get answers.
As I recall last year, when we asked questions to the CO, he just kind of wouldn't answer. We were kind of left in the dark because there was a pending case. And honestly, I think the sentiment of most people I talked to was if it was guilt, that there would be a removal of the operator from the CWMU, is what people I've talked to on the committee. And so I feel like that's what it is, and I think that's something that probably should be looked at tonight.
Do we just want to stay with questions to me, or do we want to allow both the complainant and the operator to speak?
I think we're fine to open. If the committee has questions for either the complainant or the operator, they're fine to ask those questions if they would like to. We'll leave that open to the committee. You'd like to hear from them as far as an update?
What they've done.
Okay.
What's been done, how they're feeling about it.
Yeah, well, we'll give a few minutes to the complainant and a few minutes to the operator. We'll have the operator go first.
So what we done was an attempt to trespass. The judge, everything will be resolved in August and done with. We went up through there and I had my guys, we put up the no trespass signs, taking care of all that, so it's marked. We done that after our second crop when we got done haying. One thing I would like to, I'm here to try to resolve it and work something out with the committee, the board. If you go back on my deer CWMU, we're 100% on like 15 years of it. When you guys was talking about taking 1 or 2 guys, they bring 2 guys and their dad and their ATV. We treat them very, very good. So I feel we've had a very good program. I feel it's bad to this point, but I'm here to try to work something out with you, and that's what we have, guys. It's over in August, and that's what I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Salzar?
Well, first of all, I think that the courts in the state of Utah are not hard enough on certain violations that happen. Reverse the role. If it was me that had done this, killed the elk on the CWMU, I'll guarantee you I would have been hung. The original charge was an unlawful taking of protected wildlife. It was reduced to basically attempted taking of protected wildlife. There was a trophy bull elk that was shot 800 and something yards on private property off of the CWMU. First and foremost, my father, we waited 25, 26 years for him to draw this tag, which he was robbed of an opportunity by the gentleman over there, who, besides himself, had 4 other individuals with him at the time. And that, you know, basically to wait 27 years to have a situation like that happen. Yes, we ended up filling the tag, but still to this day, I have, it still bothers me to no end. With him saying that they posted their ground, I went up in November on the Murdoch Ranch. I started basically, so I don't know if you can see it here, but if you come this way, there's an outline.
Can you please take the mic?
Oh, there's a half pivot. You can kind of see the half pivot right there of an alfalfa field. They put a no trespassing sign, CWMU sign right there. So there was a sign here, here, here. I proceeded to continue up the canyon all the way up into here, and there's no other signs all the way along here. I took pictures showing the area, no signs. The corner, which this is public ground, this is private, this is the Buckhorn Ranch. There's no signs here. There's a road that comes right here off of the Buckhorn Ranch, crosses into the Murdoch property. There's no signs here. You can see where there's been ATV tracks coming from the Buckhorn Ranch onto the Murdoch farm again, or the Murdoch ranches. So for him to say that the ground was posted, and being an operator of 16 years and this ground never has been posted, I mean, what does this say about our CWMU program in the state of Utah?
Thank you. All right, does the committee have any other questions?
Yeah, I have one question, and just keep it short for me. Was the Murdoch property correct?
Yes.
Were the Murdochs notified, or did they work in conjunction with the posting of the property line? Okay.
Any other questions or committee discussion?
Could I just understand, I was at the meeting a year ago, but, so the CWMU came from the north of that red line, where the Buckhorn, the operator and hunters came south of that line at some 800 yards and shot an elk. And the gentleman that complained here in the red, the reason it affected him is because he had the right to hunt the properties where the elk was taken, and that interfered with a long wait of getting points enough to hunt on this, I guess it's a Murdoch property?
Yes, and I think it was a little bit more complicated than that too, because both hunters shot the elk.
Oh, the same elk?
The same elk.
Well,
and if I remember correctly, the elk actually expired when it was shot by your father. Is that correct? Yeah. So the elk expired on the second shot by Mr. Salzer's father.
Okay.
And then was removed from the property.
But this Buckhorn took the elk, not, and it was outside the CWMU.
Yes, and just for clarification, it's not an elk CWMU, it's just a deer CWMU, and they were hunting with an elk client on the CWMU and came off onto the Murdoch property where they didn't have permission to be.
Okay, but it wasn't, the fact that it's the reason we're hearing it is because whether it's for elk or deer only, as a CWMU, we have a high standard of our operators.
Yep.
Okay.
If there are no more questions or comments, we'll look for a motion as to how we resolve this.
Just for some discussion, I just think we are held at, Ryan, I'm sorry, but I think we're held at a much higher standard. And hearing the public talk the way they are, even though they weren't a public hunter on a CWMU, it left a really, really bad taste in this guy's mouth. And I think we had this happen on a CWMU that I was associated with a long time ago. We had an outfitter that we had hired. He made a wildlife violation, and he was not allowed to be an operator again. And I just feel like we are held at a higher standard. And so my thoughts are that the operator didn't live up to a higher standard, even though it wasn't, they both had right to hunt on that unit. They had the right tags. They didn't have right to trespass on the Murdoch piece. But I just think that if we're willing to do that, what are we willing to do on a CWMU? And I just think that the operator should probably be removed.
And keep in mind, guys, that the code, our rule actually talks about this, and any violation of Title 23 in the Wildlife Resources Code by an operator, we are to consider whether the applicant should be approved to participate in the program. And so that really is in our rule and should be something that we are considering in this case. And I would say I agree with Tim.
Well, I agree with what you guys are saying. I mean, I also agree with the complainant. I mean, if that script was flipped and I trespassed onto a CWMU, I don't think that I'd be treated all that great. I think I'd be hammered to the wall.
Well, and in conjunction with like if I'm going to go post an unmarked property line, I think it's important to talk to my neighbors and get on the same page, especially in a case like this where, I mean, we knew there was going to be, going to be checked up on, and I know that they've treated their public hunters well, and I know that things have gone well, but sometimes decisions make it tough.
With that, we'll look for a motion. Well, let's see. Is,
I did try to contact them, they hung up. So.
sure. Yeah.
If memory serves, you guys kind of had a strained relationship anyway from,
Hey, we can't talk from the audience right now.
Oh,
We're
okay.
looking for a motion.
sorry.
All right, I'll make a motion. Make a motion that we recommend to the Wildlife Board to remove Mr. Ryan Jones as the operator of the Buckhorn Ranch, CWMU, effective as soon as possible.
I'll second.
Jay, did you get that?
I did, except for the second.
Mike?
Thank you.
Discussion on the motion?
So I was looking at the February letter from last year. And so last year what was our action last year?
We put the CWMU on probation with some terms that it was posted.
And the reason that we want to remove, or the reasons for removing him are that he didn't comply with the conditions of better posting the boundary, or what else was to have happened?
Chris, we weren't sure that he had actually violated a rule as it was going to be tried in a court case. And so we were particularly waiting, most importantly waiting to find out the results of that, and then added some conditions on top of that.
But the court case, I thought, isn't resolved until August of this year. Is that what we heard? Or was it?
No, there's been a finding.
There's been a finding, and it was a criminal trespass or something?
Yeah, Chad, do you want to speak to that again?
Yeah, and I don't know if I have the exact wording, but it was a wildlife attempt to take either wild trespassing or just attempt to take wildlife.
Okay. Okay, so, and that has been fully resolved. There was a finding. Maybe the consequences of the finding haven't, but
Yeah, there was a finding.
okay. All right, now I understand better. Thank you.
I have one point of clarification that I'd like. Is this an indefinite removal from being an operator, or is this have an expiration date of it? Is he suspended, or is he removed for life? How are we recommending that? I think that's important to discuss.
I do too. Make a recommendation and I'll add it.
Well, I don't know what the recommendation is. I don't know if, I mean, I hate publicly recorded meetings because I don't know what to say sometimes, but I'm just going to say it. I have a hard time, condemning a person for the rest of his life to never be able to do what he loves if he made a mistake and after he pays a price. So, I mean, I would say it's got to be more than 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I mean, I would probably say in the 5-year range. I don't know. I don't think I think what he did is wrong and egregious.
Let me ask this. Ryan, it's Ryan, correct? Are you the owner of the Buckhorn Ranch? The deceased Nathan Ricks? Nathan Ricks that passed away in an aircraft here a few weeks ago?
If we're going to ask him a question, let's wait until he has the mic.
Yes, that was
Okay,
him.
so what is your relationship to the ranch? Are you the manager?
I'm the manager. I run the ranch, and yes, I'm a ranch manager for Nathan, which Joyce will run. Joyce is his wife, so it will stay in the family, and that's who will be the owner now, I guess.
Uh-huh. Well, I think that there should certainly be a period of time but it shouldn't be indefinite. I don't know how long. I mean, I think it'd be somewhat different if Mr. Jones were the owner of the ranch. To me, that you know, you can't be the operator on your own ranch. It's a pretty tough sentence.
Yeah. Can I ask how, when does the COR expire? Do we know when the COR expires?
This is their last year, so they're supposed to renew this summer.
This summer. So, I mean, what if we did, how does the committee, I mean, let's talk about it. What about like 3 years? So that's the life of one COR.
I think that's reasonable.
Agree.
So I would amend the motion to have that this motion terminate after the course of 3 years. Or how would?
Well, I think what we're.
Chris, you say it.
Well, I think what we're saying is that on the next renewal of this COR, which will happen this year, right? That there needs to be another operator during the term of the next COR.
Seconded.
So just for my clarification. So they're already in line to hunt this fall. So Mr. Jones could be the operator this fall, and then when it renews for 2024.
No, I think it.
So the last year of this one, and then the first 2 years on his
Well,
next.
that would make it a 4-year.
Let's figure out what year it is and just say the year. So they hunt this year, and then they renew. So this is 23. Then their renewal goes for 24, 25, 26. So it'd be through the year 20.
So 27, he can come back.
He could be the operator for the hunting year of 27. So
when they renew.
But when they renew in August, he'd have to be eligible in August.
So we say that's okay.
So at this point, we can either amend the motion or have a substitute motion.
Let's start with an
Yeah.
motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jayla, we're going to start over. You ready?
I think the fundamental question is, regardless of the COR, is this suspension for 3 years or 4 years?
We're talking 4 years.
4 seasons, beginning this year of 2023.
So
I make a motion that for the Buckhorn CWMU, that there be somebody other than Ryan Jones as the operator for the years 2023, 4, 5, and 6.
I'll second.
Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, let's have a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimous. So again, that's a recommendation to the director and the wildlife board. Mike Lauder. East Fork, Chad?
Yeah, okay, so East Fork, Chalk Creek, this one, the complaint was that there was mistreatment of public hunters, verbal abuse, not being able to hunt the entire area, wasting of game, and other illegal activities. The advisory committee made a motion that put the CWMU on probation for 1 year to give the opportunity to improve mapping and communication with the public hunters and making sure they get full and free access. And Mr. Haskins, sorry, I think I say that wrong every time, Cal. I'm just gonna call you Cal, is that okay? And do you want him to speak, or I guess he's here to answer questions?
We'd love to hear what they've done to resolve the complaint.
Okay.
Address the issues.
I don't know, let me see here. Mistreatment, verbal abuse, not no entire wasting.
Maybe I'll pull this off so I can, maybe. If you're looking at the contents of your envelope, gentlemen, You were just given a copy of the packet that I send out to the hunters that have purchased or drawn a tag on the East Fork Chalk Creek CWMU. East Fork Chalk Creek CWMU was put on probation for 1 year and asked for a better map and better communication with the public hunter. To complete the requirements of the probation, we had a new map done by a professional engineer using legal description from the landowners and sent a copy to every hunter that received a voucher or drew a permit last year. In your packet is an updated map, and if you looked at it, you can see that it was pretty well put together. Even you can read the sections so that if you wanted to go obtain the quadrangles, you could put it together yourself and have a bigger map. But we recommended that they take this map and they laminate it and have it in their vehicle so that when they're on their ranch, they can use it to understand basically where they are and what property they're on. There's two ranches. The blue ranch is the Agard Ranch, and the black outlined ranch is Haynes Ranch. Those two ranches together are 15,260 acres. Last summer, we worked with a gentleman that was an expert at using Onyx mapping tools. Now, I think what I'm talking about here is communicating to the hunter when he's on the property. If he looks at the map and he understands what's there, and if he has an Onyx map, he'll be able to understand it. But one of the hardest areas we have is up on top. As you look at the blue area, we have every other half section. Now we have access through all of these different areas in between half sections, and so do they who have the other part of it, part of the family of the Agard family. This year we are using a gentleman again that we used last year, and he was an expert with the Onyx map, and he did all of the half sections up on the high country. He updated it. So we were happy to have that done, and we're going to use him again this year to update some other areas that we need some better, I think, a little better posting on. The packet of material contains a cover letter for the antlered wildlife and the cow outcomes, rules and regulations, hunting dates for 2023, and a new updated map of the ranch. Both the public and private hunter have always received a packet of information. The packet has always included my name and phone number, and encouraging the hunter to call me if they have any question. We require all hunters, public or private, that haven't hunted the ranch to attend a property orientation. At the property orientation, we tour the property, showing the hunters the property boundaries. If they can't make one of the two property orientation dates offered, we let them know we are on the ranch often during the summer months and would be glad to set up a time to show them the ranch. The public hunter has always been given the opportunity to hunt the entire CWMU at the same time as a private hunter. We are honored to be part of the CWMU program and have been part of it since it began. Thank you for the opportunity to update our communication and map, plus look at ourselves.
I've got a question for you, Cal. Can you show this to other CWMUs to give them a good example? It's a lot of what we talked about today. Like, for real, this is.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I said, thank you. I said, can you teach other CWMUs and show other CWMUs what you do, because I think it's exactly what would alleviate a lot of the problems we talked about today.
Yeah. Thanks.
I should say that Cal's had a lot of experience in this realm. I've known of him for a long, long time now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is it still United Sportsman?
No, no.
I'm too old for that, I guess.
Yeah. That was a long time ago.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
It was just a 1-year probation, right? So we don't need to make a motion or do anything.
I think that if we don't make a motion, they continue on probation, that they automatically would come off of probation, and that might want to document that they've met all the terms of probation and done a great job. I like the packet.
Would you guys like a motion? Are we ready? I make the motion that East Fork Chalk Creek CWMU met all terms of probation and provided evidence thereof, and that they should be taken off probation forthwith.
I'll second.
Call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Haskins, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yep. Chad, I'm not sure. You're running back and forth between the power cord and the thing, keeping the computer alive, just barely, so.
I'm done.
Yep, you're done.
Grass Valley and then Royal Ivory.
Good job.
Grass Valley first.
Yeah, so this one's Grass Valley. Last year, there was, the complaint was that they didn't allow full access to the property for the hunt. The committee decided to recommend to the Wildlife Board that they would convert one private voucher to a public draw permit, and that they'd be on probation for 3 years with a stipulation to certify in writing and notify the committee the steps taken to ensure public hunters have access to the entire ranch and are not closed or locked out of any properties in the CWMU. So an update on, we took that recommendation to the Wildlife Board, and they did not take the tag away from them. So Grass Valley does still have the same split, and they didn't convert that tag. And Travis is here to speak on it.
Travis, would you like to go to the mic? Thank you.
I appreciate your time. We do. And I have a written notification to give to you afterwards. I don't have as many copies as I need, but I can get that and forward it to you. If I can, I just want to start out with a small little story of a lady that was my 3rd grade teacher to kind of illustrate what I've thought of this last year and maybe where our mindset is with some of the things we're trying to do. There was a lady, her name was Mrs. Miles, and she was my 3rd grade teacher. My wife is a 2nd grade teacher, and we've talked recently about the facts of all of the testing and the different things that the students do. And in the end, I don't remember a thing Mrs. Miles taught me, but I remember how I felt when I was in her class. And I think it's evident today, even the display of how somebody feels when they come on a CWMU is very, very critical, and it's an important thing. And the reflection of what happened last year as we left, the complainant and I, we had dialogue, we talked, and it was an emotional experience. And I don't want somebody to ever leave our ranch with any type of a feeling that is contrary to what is in their best interest, or that they just love the experience. I have 5 sons myself, and if I had an opportunity to chase and hunt, I certainly wouldn't want to feel like I was hampered or held back in any way, shape, or form. So what we've progressively done and continued to do is, in consideration of the committee's decision last year, we'll continue to provide written notification to access of the entire CWMU on a sportsman's draw letter that we send out to every person. Secondly, we do have the summer orientation where we offer 2 dates, take them to all the navigation points to get into the properties. At that point, I will give them the lot combinations and codes. Nothing will be excluded. Everything will be presented to them at that point. I video that too, so if anybody ever wants to verify the fact that that was stated multiple times, we certainly would appreciate that opportunity for you to view that. And thirdly, we'll continue to verify entire access through emails, texts, and phone calls that we may receive. And we receive, obviously, we're a fairly large CWMU, so we have a lot of public people that are involved, and we spend a lot of time sending emails and texts and phone calls. But back to the whole idea, again, of the fact that the logistics, the X's and O's to all that we do are really critical. And you guys have a important job, as do we. But the end result is the feeling. I want them to be able to come, and this is something I've tried to portray, and sometimes those variables get a little bit confused and twisted, or different things happen, but I've certainly wanted to portray the fact that we want them to have a great experience when they come. We'd hate for them to leave with a negative connotation of a CWMU, or especially our operation. So we try hard to extend ourselves to the public for further efforts just to be there. We're excited for them and hope they have a great experience. So that's kind of the update of where we're at with what we're trying to do.
It was Travis, right?
Yes, sir.
Travis, thanks for everything you said. Grateful for your taking the opportunity to take these folks out and give them an orientation. Everything you're saying is ringing true with us, and it's going to be great for your CWMU. Will you please talk about the main issue that was the matter from last year, and that is how you're negotiating around these different property owners and allowing the public hunters the opportunity to hunt all the lands that they want.
Any owner that may have had some type of a thought of anything other than total access has been notified and communicated with that there's no longer any kind of an option. If they feel like that's something they want to remove their property from our unit, then they do have that choice. So we have went to the property owners that may have had a conflict in any way and just told them they'll have complete access to that property. And if they're opposed to that, then they're welcome to withdraw their property.
What, have they said either way what way they're thinking? Are they going to pull out? Is that going to affect?
No.
Okay.
They seem to be adjusting to the fact that that was just what needed to happen, in fairness to everybody that was able to hunt their ranch.
We, of course, understand that each of these operators, you operators, have a bunch of challenges you have to deal with. We appreciate you making that an important effort to make sure the public hunter gets that free and full access to whole ranch. Thank you for taking care of that, and please continue to watch it. And thanks for addressing the matter.
Thank you.
Well, I think we could do the similar as we did last time, look for a motion.
So, as I understand it, this was a 3-year probation that, am I reading the letter wrong? And so what is it that our options are here to ratify that? It's got 2 more years, or to remove it, or what are we saying?
I think we've got the opportunity to do whatever. The Wildlife Board didn't want to go with our other recommendation, and it looks like the operator is cooperating and participating fully. I don't have a problem with removal from probation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, even though the Wildlife Board didn't take our recommendation, the CWMU sure did. And that's, in the end, isn't that what we want? And better the program. I mean, they run a really good CWMU. So I wouldn't have a problem if somebody wanted to make a motion to reduce the probation or keep it.
I'll make a motion that we remove the probation, given in light of the update from Travis that they've addressed the issues, especially I think the number one concern that was brought forth last year was with the landowners and restriction of access, and it sounds like that's been addressed, and I'm comfortable removing the probation.
I second that.
Clint seconds.
It was seconded by a lot of folks. Which one do you want? We'll take Clint's. Okay. Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we have one more to review, and they have been waiting patiently online. We've been looking at your face all night, so we appreciate you staying with us throughout the night. Chad, you want to introduce the topic, and then we can ask questions and go from there?
Yeah. So this is Royal Ivory. The complaint alleged the CWMU is posting public land and blocking public roads. So the committee made a motion requesting Royal Ivory to properly post the boundary and remove any signs and postings on public ground or public ground, and then return and report. And I do want to say, I spoke with Harley earlier today, and he said, I will drive down to that meeting, but there's supposed to be a big snowstorm, and he lives in Wyoming where they just close all the roads. So he would have made every effort. And I said, Harley, I think we're okay. Let's pipe you in online. So he would have been here if I would have asked him to be here. So just for the record.
Honestly, it's a worse punishment to sit online for 3.5 hours. So, okay. With that, Harley, do you have any enlightenment on the motion or on what happened last year?
Well, last year we did have a sign. We got it found. I'm 100% sign. We ended up up there, ran a dozer line, on the 80 yards wide for a bulldozer because.
Hey, Harley, sorry to interrupt you. We're struggling to hear you. I'm thinking if you can shut off your camera, it will save some bandwidth. I think it's a bandwidth issue. So turn off your camera for us and let's just try audio right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that any better?
It is a little better. Thank you.
Okay. So we did run a dozer line through between us and the forest. Some places we got it fairly wide. Some places it's only as wide as a bulldozer because the country in there is so thick and bog holes and steep hillsides and everything else. We did get a store. We could put a 4-wheeler trail at least through it. We placed over 50 signs along the boundaries of that. With that, I did block the forest roads that are coming into me, just to try and help, block that off because it is my private ground right on the other side. We stayed off of the boundary line of the forest, places it's probably 10 feet. Some places, we're probably into us 50 to 100 feet. But we couldn't get cooperation or get permits through the Forest Service to be right on the line. So with that, I believe we've done what we needed to get this taken care of. 2.5 miles of dozer trails and all the countless man hours that went into this. I'm hoping we done what we needed to do to make it right.
Is this the Painter Ranch, Farley?
Yes, sir.
Farley?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Any comments or questions?
It looks like from the letter that our motion was to ask him to do what he appears to have done. There was no probation. It was just a mandate that he do certain things.
That's what I remember too, Chris.
Yeah, so there is no probation on this one, correct, Chad?
So I had written in my notes that we did put him on probation, but I don't know if that carried through or what.
Yeah, I thought we did too. I thought it was for him to come and report. I thought it was on probation maybe.
And that's why I do remember this one now. We went back and forth on it as a committee and landed on that so that they would but just because we wanted to know what had been done. Yep.
I'd make a motion that if the probation were for longer than a year, that it be terminated now.
Motion by Chris.
I'll second.
Second from Tim. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimous.
Harley, thanks for waiting for so long.
Thank you.
For your patience.
Thanks for putting your time and money and effort into fixing the problem. Hopefully it is a lot more smooth sailing for you going forward.
I hope so. Thank you.
Have a good night, man. You can go ahead and log off. You don't have to worry anymore, so thanks.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, Chad, and then this last one's just an update, correct?
Yeah, so this is mostly, I just wanted to put it on the agenda to make it public record that I think this is like the third year in a row we've had 100% operator training from operators. The attendance, everybody got it done. For the record too, I think it really helps that usually at the end of the year I do a recorded one. So the ones that, and I've been thanked by multiple operators for that. So I think it's something that we'll continue to do for those that have a hard time getting to places that they can still get the information and do that. So, yeah.
I want to say, one more thing about the sentiment of this meeting before we adjourn, and that is that the criticism and the hard conversations we have here help us defend the program later to the rest of the public. And we appreciate that. This is a good program. As somebody who's seen several other programs across Western states, I am convinced that the CWMU program is the best there is. And I'm proud of that program in our state. And I also think that these meetings are necessary to keep it high. If not, all of us, people like water, right, will all take the path of least resistance. And this is the resistance that pushes back and says, we're going to hold a high standard. We're going to keep it good.
Yeah.
So
one quick thing, I think the division really needs to work on the walk-in or the trade lands after the exchange, because that guy called me earlier that we had somebody called me. And so I would almost want to put the division on probation to get that figured out. So, but I won't.
We are already on this. We had the very next day after last meeting, we had a conversation. The individual that does the GIS for the trade lands, that position was replaced. They took another position. We've got that position rehired, and we're sitting down with our GIS staff to get that aligned, because I completely agree. If we're going to have trade lands in the program, they're going to be accessible and they're going to be right. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Second. All right, I think we're out of here. Thanks.